Chapter 482. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming wrapped the two pseudo-heavenly chains around his hands. After that, Wu Ming grabbed the two long swords on the ground. These two swords were almost exactly the same as Wu Ming's blade of salvation. To be precise, they were exactly the same as Artoria's Excalibur. These two swords were imitations created by Wu Ming using Create Green item. For the pseudo-Excalibur, although it could still release light cannons, its power and range were not only one level lower but several levels lower. Of course, the sharpness of these two pseudo-holy swords was also greatly reduced. The reason why Wu Ming used Create Green item to create these two pseudo-holy swords was to use them as consumables. Through the scanning device on the mecha armor, coupled with the fact that the other party did not cover up, Wu Ming easily saw the servant coming from behind him. It's them? Wu Ming sighed. What an ill-fated relationship. He shook his head. With their speed they could indeed get behind him, and by doing this they must not let him escape. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. I didn't expect them to be summoned as well. They can be considered old rivals. The one who strikes first gains the advantage. I won't hold back then. Wu Ming smiled. With that said, Wu Ming wrapped the chains on his arms around the hilts of the two holy swords. Immediately he threw the pseudo-holy swords. Excalibur. On the opposite side, the green-haired young man held a long spear and ran toward Wu Ming at a very fast speed. Although he was a rider, he had a permanent noble phantasm, so he did not need his own ride. Although this would expose his weakness, there were not many people who could catch up with his speed. You little thief who dares to spy on me, obediently accept your death. Then, listening to his disciple's bold words, his teacher, who had transformed into a centaur, chased after him. Don't underestimate the enemy, Achilles. The enemy is still in the same place. Achilles seemed a little impatient as he listened to Teacher Ma's earnest teachings and diligent exhortations. However, he still nodded to show that he understood. Yes, I know, Master Sharon. Although this disciple of his looked arrogant and unruly, he still gave him face as his teacher. Just as Achilles thought, there were almost no servants who could catch up with him. Even his teacher, Sharon, could not. Even if his teacher hadn't told him not to underestimate the enemy, Achilles would have slowed down. Otherwise, if Achilles were to run at full speed, even if he was in his centaur form and running on four legs, he would not be able to catch up with Achilles, let alone talk to him. At that moment, a voice came into their ears. Excalibur. What? Sharon secretly frowned. Thought in his heart this was a little troublesome. Hearing this sentence, Sharon was shocked. Not to mention that it was a liberation noble phantasm, the holy sword Excalibur was quite famous. He tried to see the enemy's figure to determine whether the enemy was King Arthur or not, but even with his clairvoyance, the enemy was deep in the forest, so Sharon could not see the enemy's appearance. In addition, not only Sharon, but Achilles also knew about the legend of King Arthur and the holy sword. After all, King Arthur was too famous, especially in Europe. Although Sharon and Achilles both knew about the holy sword, the two of them had different reactions. Is the enemy King Arthur? Unlike Charon's frown, Achilles' first reaction after hearing the word liberation was excitement. For Achilles, who was asked to choose to die as an ordinary person or die on the battlefield, chose the latter. A powerful enemy was his motivation. However, even so, Achilles wasn't a hothead. Although he did not know why King Arthur would release his noble phantasm, he had seen the power of the holy sword before, from the battle of the 14 Knights that he retained his memory of. Although he was also very puzzled as to why he retained his memory of that battle, since Sharon also retained it, he would leave the brainstorming to his teacher. Just as Achilles was about to take out his noble phantasm to surround the small world of the heavens, Achilles' cosmos, for defense, Achilles was stunned on the spot. It wasn't just Achilles. Even Sharon was stunned. This was because they saw two small light pillars less than 5 meters in diameter shooting towards them at a speed that was not considered fast. Of course, this was for the two of them who had grade A+ agility. If it were Spartacus, he would definitely be hit. Moreover, why were there two light pillars? Wasn't there only one holy sword Excalibur? What really confused Sharon and Achilles was not this, but the scale of the noble phantasm. Although they had never seen the holy sword Excalibur's noble phantasm, they had seen another holy sword's noble phantasm before. How could the scale be so different? In any case, Achilles and Sharon were completely confused right now. With such a scale, they did not even need to defend, they only needed to dodge. By the way, the two of them would not directly charge towards Wu Ming, but chose to attack from the side. Although the light pillars were less than 5 meters in diameter, if it affected Riverton, who had a master, it would be quite troublesome. That was why the two of them went to the back. Of course, not letting this strange King Arthur escape was also one of the reasons. In just a flash, Achilles dodged the attack range of the two light pillars that were less than 10 meters in diameter side by side. For servants, especially those who had grade A+ agility, a distance of 100 meters only needed a breath of time, and a fierce jump was enough. Then the two of them witnessed the small light pillars explode from their sides. Feeling the scorching heat, the two of them had no choice but to be serious. Even if it was a fake Excalibur, it was still a holy sword, and it was also a trump-card noble phantasm. Of course, it was hard to say if it hit Sharon, but even if it hit Achilles, it would not take his life. At most, it would only injure him. At this moment, Charon's eyes flickered and he hurriedly called out to Achilles. Achilles, quickly retreat. Charon's clairvoyance skill combined with mind's eye, true, to achieve a short period of future vision. Through this, he saw chains appear in the light pillars that were less than 5 meters long. Although he relied on future vision and mind's eye to avoid being tied up by the chains, Sharon saw Achilles being tied up by the chains. Hearing his teacher's words, Achilles naturally prepared to retreat. But Wu Ming seemed to have heard Charon's words, and the chains instantly appeared from the light pillars and shot towards Sharon and Achilles. Walala. Chapter 483. Whoosh! Using his wooden bow to shoot an arrow, Sharon broke the chain that was heading straight for him, and quickly retreated on all fours. Then Sharon looked in Achilles' direction. Without a doubt, Achilles was tied up. His spear fell to the ground, and his arms and body were tied up by the silver chain like firewood. In the end, Achilles had underestimated his opponent. However, this was also due to his competitive nature. Unlike Sharon, who had moved more than 10 meters, Achilles had only dodged to the side of the light pillar. It could be said that he had almost brushed against it to show off his ability. In the end, the chain covered by the light pillar had tied him up in an instant. This really was a case of, if you don't do it, you won't die. I see. The target wasn't me from the beginning. Sharon saw the light pillar disappear, and the chain slowly retracted. Perhaps it was not meant to tie him up in the first place. Realization dawned on him. Damn it, why can't I break free from the chain? Achilles said angrily. At this moment, Achilles was already using all his strength. He grimaced, but he could not break free from the silver chain. Instead, the chain was getting tighter and tighter. Sharon, on the other hand, did not care about his disciple. Instead, he raised his wooden bow and pointed in the direction of the forest. It wasn't just him. Even Achilles could feel that the owner of the chain was getting closer. So it seems that Spartacus has failed? Sharon said calmly. Of course, it was not Sharon who had asked Wu Ming to scout. Spartacus happened to be the closest to Wu Ming, so when he heard that there was an enemy, he ran over excitedly. Stop, Achilles. The chain is getting tighter the more you struggle, Sharon said to Achilles without turning his head. Achilles also realized that he could not break free no matter how hard he tried. He simply listened to Sharon and stopped struggling and looked at the forest together. Seeing that the chain that did not bind Sharon was slowly being dragged into the forest, they guessed that the enemy was about to reach the edge of the forest. That's a chain that targets divinity. After all, an immortal demigod hero isn't easy to deal with. Wu Ming's voice came from the forest. This voice is... Charon frowned again. He had sensed something when he heard the word Excalibur. Furthermore, it was rumored that Sodric had obtained the inheritance of the Knight of the Round Table, Vilo-Thranst. It was not impossible for him to have a weakened version of the Holy Sword. Therefore, Charon estimated that he was close to the mark. Of course, Achilles, who was in a state of rage, did not pay much attention to Wu Ming's words. His face was full of resentment. You despicable person, if you have the ability, let go of me and fight me head-on. What kind of hero are you if you play tricks? Then, wearing a holy white armor, a silver white chain wrapped around his right hand, and a silver white chain still wrapped around his left hand. However, this chain was connected to Achilles' body. As for the two holy swords, their durability had long since reached its limit. They turned into magic power and disappeared within the pillar of light. What? It's actually this guy. Sodric, if you have the ability, let go of me. Achilles became even more agitated as if he had seen an old enemy. I didn't expect you to be summoned here. Charon also had a face full of emotion. However, he still did not lower his bow and arrow aimed at Wu Ming. After all, this continent was too chaotic. Including them, there were a total of 6 forces. Who knew which side this old friend in front of him was on? In the face of their words, it was Wu Ming who was dumbfounded. What's going on? It was rare for them to have memories of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, or were they the servants of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen? After all, Sodric had only appeared during the Battle of the 14 Horsemen. Wu Ming, who had a deal with the two great restraining forces, had already set a rule that his servant image could not be sent out without his permission. Since Karen and Achilles recognized him, then they either had memories of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen or were the servants of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen. But how did they recognize me when they didn't see my face? Could it be through my voice? Wu Ming began to think again. Karen had indeed recognized Wu Ming's voice, but Achilles had only reacted after seeing Wu Ming's armor. As if thinking of this, Wu Ming looked at his armor in relief and understood. This armor was basically the same as the armor Wu Ming wore during the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, but the armor worn by Wu Ming during the Battle of the 14 Horsemen was not as bright as this armor. There was also the addition of a helmet. However, with Wu Ming's voice, it wasn't impossible for Achilles and Sharon to recognize him. But since Karen and Achilles both had memories, why didn't Atlanta recognize him, or did she recognize him but didn't want to say it? As for Spartacus, that guy doesn't care who you are, as long as you are an oppressor. I will beat you regardless of whether you are an enemy or not. And while Wu Ming was thinking, Achilles looked at the silent Wu Ming and was a little impatient. Say something. Karen was also thinking silently. Could it be that Sodric didn't have memories of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen like him and Achilles? Achilles' roar made Wu Ming come back to his senses. Sorry, I just didn't expect you to have memories of that time, so I fell into deep thought for a moment. Wu Ming's voice came from under the helmet again. Kaka? Then Wu Ming controlled the helmet to open. It's good that you still remember. Was the spying just now you, or was it your partner? Chapter 484. Gadotsi didn't know what to do at the moment. With the help of many servants, they finally passed through 3 singularities and retrieved 3 holy grails. Just when they were about to retrieve the holy grails after defeating all the enemies at the 4th singularity, the person behind the scenes who caused the burning of humanity actually came out in person. Because of Mr. Anderson, we managed to get a lot of information from him, but in the end, we didn't know what happened to the Magic King. He actually wanted to kill us directly. Pamela, Matthew, and even Mordred couldn't move in front of that guy. Is it going to end? Then I was saved by Assassin, who I met in Winterwood City Singularity. I was really happy, and so was Matthew. As for Pamela, although she didn't show it because of Assassin's arrival, she also relaxed. And it seems that Mordred and Assassin have an ill-fated relationship. I'm really curious. After that, although I didn't understand the conversation between Assassin and Magic King, in short, the two of them are enemies. Then, after some twists and turns, the Holy Grail of this singularity was also recovered. Then, unexpectedly, Assassin also followed us back to Chaldea. Although I wanted to talk to Assassin, my body couldn't support it. In order to go to the next singularity, I had to sleep first. Anyway, Assassin also said that he would accompany me to the next singularity. As a result, when I woke up, the doctor said that because something happened, Assassin left. How can I be so unlucky? But fortunately, the doctor said that although Assassin couldn't go with us to the next singularity, he will go back, and there will always be a chance to meet. Then, because Assassin provided the coordinates of the next singularity, it didn't take long for me and Matthew to prepare to enter the next singularity. On the contrary, Pamela still didn't wake up, but it didn't matter. Matthew was already very strong. After entering the frame, when we were about to perform the ray shift, the doctor suddenly whispered a few words. Maybe in this singularity he will come with a special identity. The cowardly doctor said something that made himself puzzled. Special identity? Could it be that the spirit base is no longer Assassin? I've been prepared for this for a long time. No matter how stupid I am, I can see that Assassin is not an ordinary servant. Can an ordinary servant compete with a crown magician and force her to leave? He was really looking forward to it. With that in mind, Matthew and I entered a new singularity, the American continent. Then he was stunned by the scene in front of him. There were Roman soldiers with similar faces and Dragonfang soldiers, as well as Caligula and Hercules, who had been defeated before. Moreover, Hercules and Caligula seemed to still remember him as they roared and charged towards him. What was going on? Fortunately, a strong light suddenly appeared in another place, attracting the two great gods. Now he and Matthew could escape. As for where to escape to? Of course, to the other side of the light. The light seemed to be emitted by a powerful servant, plus Hercules and Caligula were attracted to it. If he wanted to live for 2 more years, of course he would run in the opposite direction of the light. Although these Dragonfang soldiers and Roman soldiers were not weak, Matthew was also very strong. After a while we escaped. We happened to meet Mr. Geronimo, who was observing the enemy on the edge of the battlefield. Fortunately, Mr. Geronimo was a good person. After knowing his identity as the master of Chaldea, he invited him to join. Anyway, after asking the doctor's opinion, Matthew and I joined the team to save the United States and expel those foreign enemies. Later, Mr. Geronimo took him and Mashu to their temporary gathering place, Riverton, where they had no master or servant. Wow, there were a lot of servants here: the American outlaw Mr. Billy Boy, the faceless king Mr. Robin Hood, and Miss Elizabeth. Although Miss Elizabeth was very happy to see me when I thought of Elizabeth singing, well, it seems that Mr. Sharon and Mr. Achilles are very strong. As for why they called him Mr. Sharon, because Mr. Sharon is Mr. Sharon. In addition to these, there was also Miss Nightingale, who was known as the Angel. It was said that she was treating a seriously injured and unconscious servant. I don't know why everyone was afraid of the treatment. In any case, including Matthew, there were now a total of 9 servants around him. He gathered so many companions at the beginning. This was a treatment that he didn't get in the previous singularity. Later, because Geronimo needed to continue to investigate the situation of other forces, he took Mr. Robin Hood and Mr. Billy Boy out. On the contrary, he was quite puzzled about the problem of other forces. Was there a lot of forces in this singularity? This was different from the previous singularities. Later, Mr. Sharon answered his and Matthew's doubts. According to the current intelligence, the continent was divided into 5 regions: Washington, Chicago, Alexandria, Salt Lake City, and San Francisco, with these 5 cities as the center, spread to the surrounding areas. At present, the United States was divided into such a situation. If they added the alliance of the lone servants, there were a total of 6 forces. After all, they could no longer be underestimated. The number of nearly 10 servants was not worse than the other forces. And their 6th force occupied the places that the other 5 forces did not occupy, including Riverton, where she was now, which was the base camp of the lone servants. Apart from that, each force had a powerful background. According to Master Karong, they had not caused any trouble these days. Instead, they had been collecting information. They had discovered that these 5 forces were made up of mythical or historical figures from various countries: Celtic, Greek, Roman, Japanese, and the native forces of the United States. And in addition to the native forces of the United States, the other 4 forces had the Holy Grail. Now that I think about it, the Magic King said that he had prepared a gift for Assassin. Could it be these? But I always felt that it was not for Assassin, but more like it was for me, although it was hard to believe, but I have to accept the fact that I need to defeat these 4 forces. After learning from Mr. Sharon, the sky was dark and of course it was time to sleep. As a result, in the middle of the night, I was awakened by the unexpected arrival of the servants: Kyoheim, who sneaked down from the Rocky Mountains, and Spartacus, who rebelled against Rome. Looking at the 2 berserkers in front of me, I felt powerless for a moment. This was the same as the nurse; they were both problematic servants. However, as long as I found the berserkers' preference, it was easy to get along with them. I just had to compromise with them, and then they readily agreed. Spartacus' compromise was easy to deal with, but Kyoheim actually asked to be with her all the time, the kind of skin contact which gave me a headache. But fortunately, Kyoheim also accepted the treaty that they could only hold hands during the day and not touch at night. Looking at Kyoheim's eyes, I always felt that she would lose her virginity, like what Matthew told me. The next day Miss Pamilia woke up, and the doctor also sent her through the frame. This time our 6th force can be regarded as strong, with more than a dozen servants. Later, under the discussion of Geronimo, Mr. Sharon, and the doctor, the current combat mission was set. Tomorrow we will go to the westernmost force of the United States and ask for an alliance. After all, they don't have the Holy Grail, and the 2 sides don't need to be hostile, so we choose to ally first. Then, after familiarizing himself with everyone, night arrived. While preparing for tomorrow's itinerary, Mr. Sharon sensed that someone was investigating them. In this way, Spartacus, who had already discovered it because he was the closest to the person who was investigating them, he ran over without permission. As expected of a berserker. Mr. Sharon and Achilles also went first. After all, the enemy was in the light and Spartacus might be in danger. Later, I also pulled Matthew and others toward that position. In the distance, I saw Achilles was tied up in chains. This was really bad. After all, even the strongest among them, Achilles, was tied up by that shining silver enemy. But when I walked closer, it turned out to be Assassin. Assassin seemed to have seen me as well. She loosened the chains that bound Achilles and even waved at me. Really, it turned out to be a family member who beat up another family member. Hee in any case, assassin did not break her promise anyway, let's hug first. Chapter 485. Wu Ming loosened the chain that bound Achilles. When he saw Gadotsi, he knew that he couldn't fight, so he put the two chains directly into the golden ripple. Then, looking at Gadotsi who ran all the way to him, Wu Ming quickly touched the armor and hugged her. Big and Zhen Wu, Kaioheim, who originally wanted to stop Gadotsi, was instantly dragged to the back by Elisabeth, who was rolling her eyes. Okay, don't mess with them, can't you see that Xiaolu is very happy? Why, Elisabeth said with a smile. Kaioheim stared at Wai Elisabeth angrily as if there was fire in her eyes. Looking at Wai Elisabeth's evil smile, how could she not know the female lizard's thoughts? It was nothing more than her. Woo, you female lizard. Just you wait. Yes. Assassin. You're here. Gadotsi hugged Wu Ming and shouted happily. As for Wu Ming, he dotingly patted her little head as if he was hugging his daughter. Aren't you afraid that you'll knock into something? My armor is very hard. With your small body, what if you break it by pouncing on me like this? But I believe that you won't let me get hurt, assassin. It can only be said that Wu Ming's reliability made Gadotsi believe that she will not get hurt. Wu Ming could only smile helplessly. Okay, come down first, Matthew is still watching. Wu Ming patted Gadotsi's little head. Gadotsi also realized this and hurriedly got down from Wu Ming's body. He came to little Eggplant's side and smiled shyly. Matthew didn't care about anything, but he was quite puzzled. Senpai, you and Assassin Senpai have a good relationship, but you have only met a few times. Huh? Really? I feel okay. When Matthew said that, Gadotsi didn't care and said casually. Instead, Wu Ming fell into deep thought. Matthew was right, he and Gadotsi have been together for less than a week, how can the two of them feel like family? However, after all, it was not the time to talk. Wu Ming looked at the pitch-black surroundings and said immediately. Let's get out of here first, this is not a place to talk. Other servants saw the relationship between Wu Ming and Gadotsi, and immediately put down their vigilance against Wu Ming. After all, they just wanted to peek, even if they wanted to explain this was not the place to talk. So, they returned to Riverton's house. After returning to the house, only Sharon, Matthew, Gadotsi, and Wu Ming were left at the scene. After all, the sixth force had already been planned, and such things like discussing the plan were handed over to Sharon and Geronimo, but now that Geronimo was not there, then it was handed over to the great sage Sharon. After all, Karen's name was enough to convince everyone. Kaioheim was forcibly suppressed by Wai Elisabeth, Robin Hood, and Billy Boy. Because Kaioheim and Gadotsi signed a magic treaty provided by Da Vinci, so as long as Kaioheim wanted to touch Gadotsi at night, her power would be suppressed. But in fact, even if there was no power suppression, it was okay because this berserker's strength was only E. However, Kaioheim's desperate resistance made even Wu Ming slightly surprised, but he didn't know why Kaioheim kept staring at him. Wu Ming was confused. Of course, this was what Gadotsi ordered Wai Elisabeth and the others to do. Gadotsi saw that Wu Ming was in a good mood, and obviously she didn't want to spoil Kaioheim's mood. Pamelia saw that it was Wu Ming, and then she left with an uninterested look. Achilles, on the other hand, snorted and left. It seemed that Wu Ming's dirty trick of binding Achilles made him very unhappy. However, since it was related to his master, Achilles didn't say anything else. Then Wu Ming explained his matter and told them that he was now Selander. So, that is to say you are not Sodric now. Sharon deliberately emphasized the word, now. Sharon already knew that Wu Ming was definitely not an ordinary servant, at least not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Selander? I feel more familiar with the name Assassin, and I'm not familiar with history, so I don't know this name. Matthew, do you know it? Gadotsi was not familiar with mythology, so she wasn't familiar with the name Wu Ming said. The name Selander seems to be a character in the Long March. Matthew stayed in the sterile room all year round, so he read a lot of books and he also knew some things about Selander, but not all of it. Now let's let the genius explain. Suddenly, a rather cheerful female voice came. Then, the communicator on Gadotsi's wrist emitted a light, and a virtual electronic screen appeared, but this time it was not Roman's figure, but a woman wearing a 15th or 16th century European trench coat, with a mechanical arm on her left arm, and a strange staff with a hexagonal crystal at the top. After seeing this face, Wu Ming was shocked. Isn't this Mona Lisa? Da Vinci's wife? Obviously, Gadotsi and Matthew were also shocked by the appearance of this Mona Lisa, Da Vinci's wife. On the other hand, Wu Ming was relieved when he heard the name Mona Lisa. Da Vinci was Mona Lisa, so it wasn't that hard to accept. After all, this was a world of magic and science didn't work here at all. Da Vinci's wife, stop messing around. This time it was Roman's voice, and along with the shaking of the virtual screen, Da Vinci disappeared on the screen and Roman's cowardly face appeared instead. Sure enough, when I see this face I subconsciously hate it. Sharon frowned, and then forced himself not to look at Roman, and only listen to his voice. Even the great sage said that. Roman was disappointed and put on an expression that said, I can't do it anymore. Wu Ming estimated that if it weren't for the fact that he couldn't move freely, Roman would have lost his balance. Doctor, please get to the point. Matthew coughed and said sternly. That's right, doctor. Since it's always the same evaluation, you should accept it. Gadazzi's words were like a sharp sword that pierced Roman's body. Fortunately, Roman wasn't as unreliable as he looked. I'm okay. Roman sorted out his thoughts and began to explain. According to the history books, Selander was an orphan picked up by Skahar. He was Skahar's younger brother, and also Skahar's first disciple. Not only did he inherit Skahar's martial arts, but he also learned all the Lune runes. If we were to really count, he should be stronger than Cuchulain. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was the strongest warrior in Celtic. Assassin is that strong? The title of the strongest warrior in Celtic shocked Gadazzi. However, Roman's words made Wu Ming feel that something was wrong. Chapter 486. The reason why Wu Ming felt that something was wrong was because of the origin of Selander that Roman mentioned. As an abandoned orphan, he was adopted by Skahar. However, considering that the records in the future were not complete, and that Wu Ming and Skahar were considered siblings, Wu Ming did not intend to deny Roman's words. Then, in the face of Roman's words about being the strongest in the Celtic kingdom, Wu Ming smiled casually and said, the title of the strongest warrior in the Celtic kingdom, maybe I really deserve it. It was important to note that Wu Ming was talking about himself, not Selander. After all, the Villo of the Knights of the Round Table was also Wu Ming. Because he had already planned it in his heart, Wu Ming did not intend to tell Gadazzi and the others. So, is this also the reason why Cuchulain called you senior brother? Matthew suddenly realized. Gadazzi and Roman also recalled the time when Cuchulain was a caster at the Winterwood Singularity and called him senior brother enthusiastically. Well, in short, that's it. Wu Ming smiled and shrugged. The more he spoke, the more mistakes he would make. It was better for him to keep quiet. But if you are Selander, then you are related to the easternmost Celtic kingdom. Suddenly, Sharon looked at Wu Ming with a serious expression, as if he was guarding against something. The easternmost Celtic kingdom? What does this have to do with assassin? Gadazzi was puzzled. By the way, although she knew that Wu Ming was now called Selander, Gadazzi still wanted to call Wu Ming assassin. Then Roman spoke. Tachika, do you remember when Geronimo said that there were only two forces fighting? Although she didn't understand Roman's words, Gadazzi naturally remembered what Geronimo had said. Of course I remember. Mr. Geronimo chatted with me during our free time. He said that there were originally only the native forces of the United States and the Celtic forces on this continent. Not long after, the other three forces appeared. That's right. This represents the original history of the United States resistance against the United Kingdom. However, it has become a dispute between the United States heroic spirits and the Celtic heroic spirits, Roman explained. Matthew looked at Gadazzi and Roman on the screen with a puzzled look. Because it was what Geronimo said to Gadazzi when they were chatting. Apart from Matthew and Roman who happened to hear it, even Matthew didn't know about it. After all, I thought that since we're already part of the five forces, I didn't tell everyone about this. Gadazzi awkwardly scratched the back of her head. At this moment, the great sage Sharon spoke up. Msader is right about that. Then, I believe that Mr. Romani wants to talk about the leader of the Celts, Maeve, that we learned from Geronimo. All I can say is that he is indeed a sage, addressing Romani as Mr. Romani. When Ka Rong said this, it was Wu Ming who looked embarrassed. What about Maeve? Don't we already know that the leader of the Celtic forces is Maeve? It had to be said that Gadazzi really didn't know much about history and mythology. However, she couldn't be blamed. If it wasn't for some reason or interest, most students wouldn't know about Maeve. At this moment, our little eggplant blushed and quietly whispered into Gadazzi's ear. Senior, if the historical records are correct, Senior Selander is the person Maeve loves? Eh? Gadazzi looked at the blushing Matthew, then looked at the awkward Wu Ming. It seemed like this was true. You're right, but it's not as simple as you think, Tachika. Wuming adjusted his expression and coughed twice. Selander is right. According to the historical records, Selander didn't accept Maeve's courtship. Roman spoke at the right time. Could it be a one-sided love? Instantly, Gadotzi's mind was filled with a tragic scene. Seeing Gadotzi fall into a reverie, Wuming gave her a karate chop. Although I don't know what nonsense you're thinking, it's definitely not what you think. Is that so? Ahem? Because Wuming didn't use much force, Gadotzi could only hold her head and smile awkwardly. Then, Roman began to tell the story of the long march to seize the bull. Selander finished his apprenticeship in the demonic realm and walked all the way to Connaught. He settled down there and by chance, he saved Maeve, who was the current lord of Connaught. In the end, Maeve stayed behind as a guard. Selander also stayed behind because he had nowhere else to go. Gadotzi and Matthew listened attentively. Sharon didn't interrupt. On the other hand, Wuming nodded. This was in line with his experience. Maeve could be said to be the Greek goddess of beauty, Aphrodite. She played with all the men she met. However, because Selander turned a blind eye to Maeve's beauty, Maeve's competitive spirit was aroused. In the end, because of her willfulness, she started a war with Ulster. The source of the war was the snatching of a sacred bull. After that, there was the story of Selander and Cuchulainn killing each other. In the end, the war ended because Maeve's father, the King of Ireland, interrupted. Selander took the opportunity to leave and Cuchulainn was killed by Maeve's plot. Maeve was also assassinated because she was immersed in her love for Selander because of Selander's departure. That was the end of the story. Roman briefly described the long march to snatch the bull. It was almost the same as Wuming's experience. Wuming really didn't know what happened after that. With his own long march to snatch the bull, the ending was probably different from the original story. Therefore, Wuming didn't say anything. Actually, the rumors about Maeve and Selander are a little messy. There are a few versions, but this version is generally recognized as the most historically accurate, Roman continued. Wuming nodded in his heart. It was indeed quite accurate. It can be said that the long march to snatch the bull was caused by Selander. If it wasn't for Selander, I'm afraid there wouldn't be a long march to snatch the bull. However, Wuming smiled bitterly. You're wrong about that. If it wasn't for me, Maeve would have caused this war because of her selfishness. And Maeve also met two men who weren't swayed by her beauty. One loved her the most and the other was the most ruthless. Wuming could understand. The one who loved him the most was naturally himself, and the one who was the most ruthless was probably Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn had delayed Maeve a lot of things. Although Maeve's original intention was to use the war to delay Wuming, the meticulous Maeve must have planned how to make Wuming stay after the victory. In the end, she was delayed by Cuchulainn, and Wuming took the opportunity to escape. Speaking of which, I still have to thank junior apprentice brother, Wuming thought. So that's how it is. What Master Karen is trying to say is that Assassin's appearance should be related to Maeve, right? Suddenly, Gadotzi clenched his fist and punched the palm of his other hand. When did Gadotzi become so smart? Wuming looked at Gadotzi in confusion. Chapter 487. Hey. Why are you guys looking at me like that? Is it weird that I know? Gadotzi looked at Roman, Sharon, Matthew, and even Wuming's doubtful and surprised eyes. After all, Tachika, you're not that smart. Roman, on the other hand, laughed out loud. Then she was shut up by Gadotzi's resentful glare. In fact, there are a lot of things that Roman said are not quite right, but that's generally the case and this spiritual base is indeed related to Maeve. When Roman talked about the Celtic forces in the easternmost region, Wuming also guessed what Roman wanted to say. After all, this group of servants must have collected a lot of information over the past few days. Yesterday, when Rome and Greece were fighting, a Celtic servant broke into the battlefield. I think you guys also know about it. After Wuming finished, Sharon nodded and replied. Master and Mashu were brought back from the edge of the battle by Geronimo, who was collecting information. And in the end, even here we saw a big explosion. It's the explosion that's comparable to a nuclear bomb. Fortunately, Matthew and I ran fast. If we were affected, we would really be finished. Gadotzi had a happy expression, and Matthew was also relieved. Although he was very strong in the face of such a big explosion, even he didn't have the confidence to resist it with his noble phantasm. We have a partner who was injured by the big explosion and he is still in a coma. But Karen's sentence attracted Wuming's attention. Could it be Rama? Hey! How do you know? Roman shouted in an instant. Seeing Roman's reaction, Wuming laughed. How could he not know? How could he not know about the explosion that he created? Not to mention himself, even Caesar and Cleopatra, who were very close to the explosion, probably wouldn't have fainted. As a servant's own defense, coupled with the hurricane caused by the big explosion, they probably wouldn't have fainted even if they were injured. As for further outside, even if there were other servants, they wouldn't have fainted. Only Roman, who was the closest to the big explosion and had overdrawn his spiritual base to use his noble phantasm, would have fainted. Therefore, Wu Ming immediately knew who the unconscious servant was. That being said, Rama wasn't an ordinary person. He had overdrawn his spiritual base to continuously use his noble phantasm, plus he was affected by his own supernoble phantasm, but he was only fainted. He was worthy of his opponent in another world. And Sharon guessed something. He looked at Wu Ming in shock. Are you the servant who caused that explosion? Wu Ming only nodded his head in response. What? So, the white light was released by you, assassin? Gadotsi was also surprised. She missed the opportunity to meet Wu Ming for nothing. Then Wu Ming told everyone about himself. He was summoned by Maeve to the battlefield between Greece and Rome, killed Caligula, defeated Hercules, rescued Argo and destroyed it. Then Rama angrily chased after him and attacked him. His noble phantasm collided with Rama's noble phantasm. As there was too much mana, it directly caused a nuclear explosion. Then he went back to rest for a day and came here. After listening to Wu Ming's explanation, everyone nodded in retrospect. That Rome's berserker is Caligula, the third emperor of Rome and the uncle of the tyrant Nero. Speaking of which, assassin, you were able to kill that berserker so easily. That's pretty amazing, Gadotsi said excitedly. Hearing this, Wu Ming thought, could it be that Gadotsi and Matthew were teleported to the battlefield? How unlucky they were. By the way, Tachika, were you teleported to the center of the battlefield? Wu Ming didn't ask, but he still wanted it. Once he asked, Gu Dazi's face instantly drooped. Assassin, you don't know. At that time it was all the doctor's fault. We said that we would be teleported to a safe place, but we were directly teleported to the center of the battlefield. Matthew and I almost died. Fortunately, you led Hercules and Caligula away. Roman, who was being complained about, also had a bitter expression. I didn't have a choice. The magic power of this singularity suddenly changed before you guys entered. The concentration increased by more than a little, almost comparable to the god's generation. Because of this, the teleportation location was wrong. When Roman said this, Wu Ming nodded. After all, the Magic King created 4 holy grails, and the concentration of magic power increased as well. This was also why Wu Ming felt that the air was fresh. However, too high a concentration of magic power could be considered a poison to a modern person like Gadotsi. Fortunately, it hadn't reached that level yet. That's it? Then I've wronged you, Doctor, Gadotsi apologized to Roman. Actually, this is also my fault. You must know that justice depends on you. Something happened to you, I would be a sinner. Fortunately, you're fine now. At this time, Sharon, who was distracted just now, came back to his senses. After knowing that Hercules was fine, he was also relieved. After all, Hercules was Charon's disciple, so it was inevitable that he would be worried. Then, Celander, are you our enemy? Sharon said seriously. Mashu and Roman were stunned for a moment, but they quickly reacted. Don't think so. Roman smiled awkwardly. If he was really an enemy, then they had invited a wolf into the house. How can I be an enemy? Since Assassin said that she would help us in the control room, then she must be a partner. Looking at his senior's determined eyes and hearing his senior's indifferent tone, Matthew was stunned for a moment before he spoke. Yes, I believe in Senior, and I also believe in Senior Celander. Sharon smiled when he saw this. Of course, I believe in Celander's character. Otherwise, I wouldn't have allowed you to bring him here. After all, Sharon had a good impression of Wu Ming since he had the memory of the 14 Horsemen battle. But I still have to ask. After that, Sharon looked at Wu Ming again. Wu Ming naturally shook his head. I am indeed not an enemy. To be honest, the Celtic forces are no longer an enemy to you because the person in charge of the Celtic forces is now me. The place fell into silence. Then Sharon covered his ears. Hey hey hey. The sound penetrated the house and attracted other servants. Sharon removed his hands that were covering his ears and went out to send away the servants that were attracted by the sound of the scream. As expected of a teacher, he had already expected this scream and covered his ears in advance. So why are you so surprised? Even though Wu Ming was a servant, facing the girl's scream, Roman automatically ignored it. He still couldn't stand it. But, one of the 4 bosses that we need to defeat suddenly became one of our own. It's a bit hard to react. Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. For bosses? Wuming was puzzled by Gadotsi's words. Chapter 488. According to Master Sharon and Geronimo's information, we know that there are 4 forces that have the Holy Grail, and the way to restore this singularity is to retrieve the 4 Holy Grails. So, we need to defeat the 4 big bosses. Gadotsi said with a smile while looking at Wuming. Although it's not wrong to say that it feels like we're playing a game. Tachika, be serious. Roman said weakly. Hearing Roman's complaint, Matthew felt quite embarrassed, but it was good that his senior could be so cheerful. Forget it, lass. All you need to know is that the Celtic side that I represent is already one of us. Although I can't say that I'm supporting you, I definitely won't hinder you, Wuming replied with a smile as he patted Gadotsi's head hard. All right. Can't say that I'm supporting you? This made everyone puzzled. After all, Wuming was the leader of the Celtic side, how could he not support them? Wuming just explained with a wry smile. After all, it's not that easy to command the Celtic servants, unless you use the Holy Grail to forcibly control them, but if that's the case, it's better not to control them. Wuming knew that forcibly picked melons would not be sweet, so for Finn and the others, if they were not willing, Wuming was not prepared to forcibly control them with the Holy Grail. That's right, just not being enemies with us is already a big help. Roman sighed with relief. The Celtic forces were not as difficult to deal with as Greece and Rome. However, as long as Assassin is here, she can be considered a force, Gadotsi said playfully. Roman and Matthew were stunned, but after thinking about it carefully, they realized that it was true. Just like the previous nuclear explosion except for those first-class servants, no, it should be the top servants who could withstand it. Like Achilles, in theory he had an immortal body, but if he was in that big explosion he would probably die. After all, he wouldn't be able to protect his heel from that kind of explosion. However, speaking of helpers, I can find you some. Wuming thought of Athena and the other subordinate gods. Actually, we already have a lot of servants on our side, so there's no need to deliberately look for more helpers. Right now, it's better to retrieve the Holy Grail as soon as possible. Roman was right. If they deliberately looked for helpers, it would have some impact on their next plan. Taking advantage of the situation was fine, but there was no need to do it deliberately. Wuming also nodded. That's true. It is indeed troublesome to summon them. The Skywings relied on the clones of Wuming's 12 clones to form a connection with Wuming, but Celander's spirit base did not have such an ability, so it could only rely on its subordinate gods. Although the subordinate gods also relied on their own ability to summon them, Wuming could also draw a magic circle to summon the clones of Athena, Lancelot, and the others from the world of the gods' layers. However, it would also take some effort. Thinking about it this way was putting the cart before the horse. Then forget it. Actually, Tachika is right. With me around, this trip will definitely be easy. Wuming nodded and patted Gadotsi's little head, causing Gadotsi to giggle and nudge Wuming's hand. It was not that Wuming was arrogant, but Wuming, who had cheated, could retrieve all 4 Holy Grails in a week if he wanted to. Of course, the premise was that the Magic King did not cheat. After all, it was a gift from that guy. Wuming did not think that it was as simple as having a few more servants. In addition, there was also Gadotsi, so Wuming chose to proceed step by step. I was originally going to go through this place to the American forces in the west of the Rocky Mountains to prepare for an alliance. Who would have thought that I would inadvertently spy on Tachika? When Wuming said this, Matthew and Roman also sighed. Gadotsi, on the other hand, looked very happy. This means that I am fated to be with Assassin, he. Looking at Gadotsi, who was looking at him with a smile, Wuming also smiled. You said that you were going to the west of the Rocky Mountains. Are you going to unite with Edison? At this time, Sharon, who had sent away the other servants, also came back and happened to hear Wuming's words just now. Yes, after all, only the American forces that originally confronted the Celts did not hold the Holy Grail, so I decided to try to unite with the Lionhead, but... Then Wuming paused and continued. I don't know about the Edison you were talking about. I just heard from Maeve that the current ruler of the American forces is a Lionhead. Lionhead. Everyone was also stunned. Could it be that Edison is a Lionhead? What's going on? I also learned about Edison from Geronimo. According to the information collected by Robin Hood from the residents, their current president is indeed called Edison. Sharon looked at Wuming and said. Wuming also knew that Sharon must not be lying, so he nodded. And coincidentally, we are also going to unite with Edison. After all, the other party does not have the Holy Grail, so he is indeed a good ally. Sharon continued to talk to Wuming. And Wuming was also happy after hearing this. In that case, let's go together. Sharon also nodded. I also have the same idea. I'm going to only let Master and Matthew go with you. This way the others can also free up some time. After all, we still have 3 opponents to deal with. Sharon sighed and continued. Although we have a large number of followers except for Achilles, the other followers have a very low chance of winning against the Greek and Roman servants. As for me, in front of Hercules and the others, I can only follow the rules. We are also relieved to have your help. Wuming also understood Karen's words. The followers that Wuming saw just now, in terms of real strength, only Achilles, Sharon and Pamilia could enter Wuming's eyes. The others did not bring the slightest sense of threat to him. For example, although Spartacus' noble phantasm was powerful, it was purely self-destructing. Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Geronimo, and the rest were only able to search for enemies. The intelligence they gathered was very reliable, but their combat power was still too weak for their current opponents. As for why Lisabeth and Kyoheim, who was just dragged away with her mouth covered, felt like a problem child, and why Lisabeth, it seemed that the other followers were afraid of her. Could it be that she was actually very strong? Alright, they still had Rama, who was seriously injured and unconscious. If Rama wasn't injured, he would also be a reliable expert. But now he had become a burden. This was really a case of a tiger being bullied by dogs. Just when Wuming was thinking, Gadotsi smiled happily. Good, with Assassin the journey will be much safer. It was not that Sharon and the others were not helpful, it was just Gadotsi's temporary feeling. Gadotsi did not have any negative emotions, so Sharon was not angry. In that case, you will be on the road tomorrow morning. Sharon proposed. Whether it was Roman, Matthew, or Gadotsi, they had no objection to Karen's proposal. By the way, Rama has not woken up yet, I will go and see him. Wuming suddenly said. Chapter 489. Assassin, do you know how to heal as well? Gadotsi said in surprise. I'll have to see it for myself. Sharon said with a smile. Both Mashu and Roman also showed their interest. Roman's words were only because he was the head of the medical department, and Mashu's words were because she had always been interested in the heroes who left their names in history, especially the one who changed from assassin to Sarand. After all, he had taught a medical expert who had created the elixir of immortality. In terms of treatment, he could not be regarded as a grandmaster, but he could be regarded as a master. However, Wuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. I don't know how to heal, I only know some healing magic, but I have a way to cure Rama. After all, it could be said that Romo had become like that because of him. Now that he had another teammate, it wasn't that bad. It was much better than having another burden. But since you want to see it, then let's go together. Later, Wuming, Gadotsi, Matthew, Sharon, and Roman came to a house in Riverton with lights on. Along the way, Sharon told Wuming that there were humans living in this town, and they were actually the outsiders. However, because of Geronimo, the residents also accepted Sharon and other servants. After all, they could at least protect them. As for why they would protect them, along the way the lights in the surrounding houses were turned off. After all, this was a matter of course. When Wuming arrived, the moon had already risen high in the sky. Servants could not sleep, but Gadotsi could not. It could be said that if it were not for Wuming's unexpected arrival, Gadotsi would have fallen asleep long ago. However, Wuming's arrival was also an unexpected surprise for Gadotsi. Sharon knocked on the door of the room, followed by the sound of trotting, and the door was opened. What are you doing? Don't you know that the wounded need to rest? The person who came was a woman dressed like a battlefield doctor. She had a pretty face, a red top that looked like a military uniform, a black pleated skirt, white pantyhose, and short boots that reached her calves. She looked like both a nurse and a soldier, giving people a strange feeling. This is Miss Nightingale. She has very special medical skills. Sharon awkwardly introduced her to Wuming. Not only Sharon, but even Gadotsi, Mashu, and even Roman on the virtual screen had strange expressions on their faces. On the other hand, Wuming was baffled. She looked very normal. It's already night time. The wounded need to rest. You should leave quickly. I still have to prepare for the amputation. Nightingale said calmly. According to Wuming's knowledge, Rama seemed to be the only injured person here. In other words, this servant wanted to perform an amputation on Rama? Then Wuming heard Gadotsi and Matthew whispering behind him. Hey. Aren't there servants taking turns to guard Rama with Nightingale? What's going on? Senpai, have you forgotten? When Senpai Selander arrived, almost all the servants had left. Mr. Geronimo did not come back and Senpai Karen was with us. Just now Miss Elizabeth, Mr. Robin Hood, and Mr. Billy Boy joined forces to suppress Kyoheim. Usually they would take turns, but because of what happened just now, only Miss Nightingale is left here. Parmelia and Achilles naturally wouldn't watch Nightingale here to prevent her from doing anything to Rama. Fortunately we came quickly. Listening to the constant whispering behind him, Wu-Ming smiled awkwardly. He finally understood why everyone treated this angelic young lady with such special treatment. Miss Nightingale, hello and nice to meet you. My name is Selander. Anyway, let's say hello first. Hello, Mr. Selander, do you need an amputation? Wu-Ming was silent for a while. Why do you want an amputation so often? Are you that obsessed with amputation? If that's the case, ahem. It's like this. Achilles needs to be amputated. He specially asked me to invite you over, Wu-Ming said in an extremely serious tone. Is that so? I'll go over now. Help me take care of the wounded. Nightingale's eyes lit up, and she immediately returned to her room. A moment later she walked out with 2 small green bags and walked toward Achilles' house. Anyway, the distance was not close and it was enough for Wu-Ming to treat Rama. Selander, you really? Sharon looked at Wu-Ming with a dumbfounded expression. Wu-Ming also coughed a few times awkwardly. However, Achilles, my good brother, please do me a favor. If Achilles heard Wu-Ming's words, he would definitely use his chariot to attack Wu-Ming. Matthew and Gadotzi also fell into a reverie. The immortal body that was invulnerable to swords and spears needed an amputation, and the image of Achilles' limbs that Nightingale could not cut off no matter how hard she tried appeared in their minds. The direction, no matter what, Achilles will be fine. Let's go in and take a look at Rama. Wu-Ming smiled and then walked in. Sharon also knew his disciple's ability. Nightingale would not really amputate Achilles' limbs, so he stopped thinking about it and followed Wu-Ming into the house. Gadotzi and Matthew saw that the 2 of them had entered, so they quickly followed. After all, the 2 of them were here to see how Wu-Ming would treat Rama. As for Achilles? Why would an immortal hero be afraid of a nurse? Let's not care about him for now. Just like that, Achilles was unknowingly bought by his teacher and master. After entering the house, Wu-Ming followed the magical aura to Rama's room. At that moment, Rama did not seem to have any injuries on his body, but his face was full of sorrow. He was unconscious and his mouth seemed to be mumbling something. Sito. My Sito? At that moment, Wu-Ming could only smile bitterly. He did not hate such an infatuated person. Moreover, she was like this because of him. Therefore, he was even more certain that he should save Rama. Rama's spiritual base is quite unstable now. It could disappear at any time. You can say that Rama's firm belief saved him. If not for that, I'm afraid that Rama would have left when he was unconscious, Sharon said beside Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming nodded and then looked at the unconscious Rama again. Indeed, Rama's belief was probably his wife, Sito. To put it simply, Rama is extremely lacking in magical power now. If he had enough magical power, he would be able to recover on his own without our help. At that moment, Roman, who had turned off the virtual screen for some reason, turned it on again and projected it in front of Wu-Ming. Only magical power? Wu-Ming was stunned when he heard that. That seemed to be right. Rama had to rush and release his noble artifact. He had to squeeze out his spiritual base because he did not have enough magical power. If he had enough magical power now, he might not be able to recover immediately, but at least he would not be on the verge of leaving. That's right. Because Rama is unconscious, Tachika can't sign a contract with him. However, even if she did sign a contract, Tachika probably doesn't have enough magical power, Roman said bitterly. Moreover, the other servants don't have much magical power to begin with. Therefore, even if I have a way to transfer magical power to Rama, the magical power gathered by all of us can only keep Rama alive. There's no way to save him at all. Sharon shook his head. Wu-Ming secretly nodded in his heart. That was also true. If not for that, perhaps even if Rama was saved by Geronimo, he would have disappeared by now. However, since Rama is lacking magical power, then this treatment will be simple. Wu-Ming smiled slightly. Simple? Several people were puzzled. However, Sharon realized something. I lack everything, but the one thing I don't lack is magical power. Chapter 490. After saying that, Wu-Ming's body erupted with a huge wave of mana. Matthew and Gadotzi were directly pushed away, and Sharon had to struggle to maintain his body to not be pushed away. Roman's screen, on the other hand, disappeared due to the violent fluctuations of mana. Then Wuming raised a hand in front of him, and countless amounts of mana in his body and the mana released outside of his body converged. Streaks of dark blue mana continuously converged. This was because the purity of the mana was so high that it could be seen with the naked eye, and this made Sharon tremble. Countless amounts of mana continuously condensed in Wuming's hand, and not long after, this mana formed a blue high-density mana crystal in the shape of a holy grail. With the appearance of this mana crystal, the wind in the room also disappeared. If not for the traces of chaos in the room and the fact that Gadotsi and Matthew were paralyzed on the ground from the wind, perhaps the wind just now would have been mistaken for an illusion. You recognize this thing, right? Wuming weighed the mana crystal in his hand and looked at Gadotsi and Matthew. The two of them stood up in a sorry state, patted their aching buttocks and nodded. I've seen it before. Chaldea has many mana crystals, but why is yours blue? And it's much bigger than Chaldea's. Gadotsi indicated that her mana crystal was a green cube, and it was in small pieces. There's more to be surprised about next. Wuming smiled and then released his mana again. But this time, the mana released only filled Wuming's hand, so Gadotsi did not need to worry about being blown away again. The three of them just watched Wuming continue. Pure mana that was visible to the naked eye appeared in Wuming's hand. The dark blue mana climbed onto the blue Holy Grail crystal, and as if it was dyed, the Holy Grail crystal began to change color. Surprisingly, when the dark blue color covered the blue mana crystal, it didn't dye it a deeper blue, but a golden color. While he was at it, Wuming also smoothed out the edges and corners of the Holy Grail's crystal with magic. Just like that, a Holy Grail appeared before Gadotsi. The Holy Grail? Roman shouted in shock as the virtual screen reappeared. That's not it, Doctor. That's a mana crystal created by Assassin. It's just that it's been dyed with some color. After hearing Gadotsi's explanation, Roman calmed down and used the equipment to analyze the Holy Grail. In the end, just as Gadotsi had said, this Holy Grail was just a magic crystal. However, this was enough for Roman to look at Wuming in a different light, because this Holy Grail was indeed an incomplete Holy Grail. After Roman's examination, the Holy Grail, held by Wuming, also had an unimaginably large amount of mana. It was almost the same as the real Holy Grail. It could be said that the Holy Grail held by Wuming only had the characteristic of having a large amount of mana. Apart from that, this Holy Grail didn't have the ability of the real Holy Grail. However, just this alone was enough to surprise Roman. Just now, due to the influence of the magical fluctuations and the poor signal, the connection between Roman and Gadotsi was directly cut off. However, because Wuming's speed of condensing the mana crystal wasn't slow, it only took a few minutes for Roman to reconnect. In other words, Wuming created an incomplete version of the Holy Grail in just a few minutes. I'm afraid you're the only one who can do such a shocking thing in just a few minutes. Roman had a strange expression on his face as he said embarrassedly. Roman was naturally referring to Wuming's identity, and Wuming also understood what Roman meant. Then, looking at Gadotsi, who was staring at the Holy Grail in his hand, Wuming smiled. Then Wuming threw the Holy Grail in his hand to Gadotsi. Under Matthew's worried gaze, Gadotsi caught the Holy Grail in a panic. There's no hurry to use this on Romo now. You and Matthew can take a look at it. Then the two little girls, Matthew and Gadotsi, went to the side with the Holy Grail in their hands. They were still very interested in the item that was basically the same as the Holy Grail. After all, every time they retrieved the Holy Grail, they would be directly teleported back to Chaldea, so they were also quite curious. After seeing the two little girls go to the side, Wuming looked at Sharon. When Nurse Nightingale returns, I'll let her use this Holy Grail, bit by bit on Romo. As for bit by bit, after all, Romo's body was on the verge of collapse. If too much magic was injected at once, perhaps it would directly shatter. It was like a glass that had been soaked in boiling water for a long time. After taking it out, a large amount of cold water was poured into it. There was no doubt that the glass would explode. Sharon nodded. As a sage, Sharon naturally understood Romo's current situation. It was like a glass soaked in boiling water. Since it's settled, then Tachika and Matthew, you two should go and rest first. It's getting late and we still have to hurry tomorrow. Gadotsi was an ordinary person, so sleep was very important. Although Matthew was a subservient, he still had human habits. But even if he didn't sleep, Matthew wouldn't be able to last more than a few days. Then Wuming looked at Gadotsi and Matthew, who were constantly touching the Holy Grail. Hearing someone call him, Matthew's face turned red, and he quickly took his hand away from the Holy Grail. Gadotsi smiled and returned the Holy Grail, to Wu Ming. If that's the case, I also want to close the channel. Good night, everyone. Roman smiled and said good night and closed the virtual screen. After Wu Ming gave the Holy Grail to Sharon, he left with the two little girls. Remember where you live, I won't send you off. After all, Wu Ming didn't know the way, so he didn't want to send them off. Hey. Don't, assassin. Matthew and I miss you. Come with us. Gadotsi instantly pulled Wu Ming's arm and acted like a spoiled child when Matthew's face turned red. Wu Ming smiled helplessly and nodded. Well, I have nothing to do now anyway. On the way to Gadotsi and Matthew's residence, Gadotsi kept chatting with Wu Ming. From time to time, she would act like a spoiled little sister to Wu Ming. This made Matthew, who was behind them, blushed. After all, this town wasn't that big. Even if Gadotsi deliberately slowed down, they arrived after chatting for a while. Alright, hurry up and sleep. Otherwise, I won't bring you along tomorrow. Wu Ming patted Gadotzi's little head dotingly. Matthew too. Don't delay your sleep because you care too much about your seniors. Even if you're a subservient, you're still a human. Sleep well. Matthew nodded with a red face. Good night, assassin. Then Matthew and I will go in first. After Matthew bowed to Wu Ming, he followed Gadotsi into the room. Wu Ming, who stood outside the door, didn't leave immediately. Instead, he was thinking about something. Why do I feel that Tachika is getting more and more intimate? She's just like my little sister. Wu Ming thought about this problem and turned around to leave. In the room, Gadotsi was humming happily as he made the bed for the two of them. Because there weren't many rooms, she and Matthew basically slept in the same bed. After all, Gadotsi couldn't let her little sister sleep on the ground. By the way, Senior is very close to Senior Cylinder. It's just like a brother. Matthew, who was standing behind Gadotsi, said gently. Oh, really? I don't feel anything. I just want to do that. Gadotsi was stunned and smiled slightly. Then her smile became mischievous. Could it be that Matthew is jealous? Gadotsi looked at Matthew with sneaky eyes. How could it be? Matthew instantly panicked. But after seeing the look in his senior's eyes, he understood that his senior was teasing him. In an instant, Matthew's little face bulged like a bun. He pretended to be angry and looked at Gadotsi. Senior? Okay, let's sleep. We still have to hurry tomorrow. Senior is so annoying. Chapter 491. The night went by silently. Early the next morning, Wu Ming knocked on Gadotsi's door. The one who opened the door was naturally Matthew, who had the physique of a servant. Gadotsi hadn't woken up yet, and when she saw Wu Ming, she kept yawning. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. At this moment, at the west entrance of the town, Wu Ming, Gadotsi, and Matthew stood on one side, and other servants stood on the other side. Many of Riverton's residents were hiding in the distance, watching from afar. Even if the residents allowed these servants to live here, no matter how kind these servants were, they were not human, and the gap between the two couldn't be closed. Cough. Returning to the main topic, everyone was naturally sending Wu Ming and the other two off. By the way, Pamilia was still sleeping. After all, she was a vampire. Nightingale and Achilles, on the other hand, did not come for some unknown reason. On the contrary, Rama had already woken up and participated in the farewell ceremony. Early in the morning, Wu Ming would take Gadotsi and Matthew to the west coast of the American continent to unite with Edison. Although it was a bit uncomfortable to give Chaldea's master to a servant who was originally an enemy, since it was Gadotsi's decision, they naturally agreed. Of course, some people were happy, some people were sad, some people agreed, and some people opposed. Kyoheim bit her sleeve, looked at Gadotsi with tears in her eyes, and then looked at Wu Ming angrily. She kept looking back and forth. That's enough, it's not a life and death parting. Robin Hood, who was standing on the side, sighed and shook his head helplessly. Billy Boy, who was standing next to Robin Hood, also nodded. Then Elizabeth, who was in her costume, smiled. That's Little Dear's happiness. You'd better send her your blessings. Little Dear was Elizabeth's pet name for Gadotsi. Listening to her enemy's words, Kyoheim was even angrier. Damn stinky lizard, if it weren't for you, Anjin-sama would not fall into the hands of that man. Anjin-sama was Kyoheim's nickname for Gadotsi. At that moment, Kyoheim vented her anger on Elizabeth. Look at how happy Xiaolu is now, it's none of your business. Elizabeth naturally refused to be outdone and stared at Kyoheim. Looks like I have to teach you a lesson in order to win back Lady Ingen's love. Who's afraid of who? When Robin Hood and Billy Boy saw the two girls with dragon attributes staring at each other, they tactfully retreated and kept their mouths shut. On the other side. Do you really not need us to send another servant to protect Tachika-sama? Geronimo was still a little worried. This morning, Geronimo, who went out to inquire about information, had returned, and naturally participated in the farewell ceremony. Oh, I really don't need it. Assassin is very strong. Gadotsi held Wu Ming's arm and said with a smile. Believe in Cylinder, Geronimo. Karen's gentle voice came from the side. After all, as soon as Geronimo returned, he learned that the master of his contract would go to Edison with a servant of the Celtic side who had just formed an alliance. This really shocked him. Geronimo looked at Sharon, then looked at Gadotsi and nodded. I'll leave the master to you, Mr. Cylinder. Don't worry, even if the enemy steps over my dead body, they won't be able to hurt Tachika. Not to mention the enemy can't step over my dead body. Wu Ming said to Geronimo and Sharon. And the guarantee of Wu Ming, who created a nuclear explosion, was naturally enough to convince them. At this time Sharon also spoke. By the way, Cylinder, Nightingale didn't come back last night. I have ways to treat patients, so I used the Holy Grail on Rama, and the effect was not bad. This made Wu Ming stunned for a moment. Nightingale didn't go back and she disappeared this morning. Achilles also disappeared today. Could it be that Nightingale chased after Achilles to do an amputation, and the two of them chased each other away? As if he saw Wu Ming's doubts, Sharon smiled bitterly. My disciple is indeed missing. I think it might be related to Ms. Nightingale. Sharon purposely went to look for his disciple this morning, and found that his disciple's house was in a mess. The windows were open as if he was being chased by something. Thinking about it carefully, it might be that Nightingale. After all, she was a berserker. How could a berserker be easy to deal with? Compared to other classes, even an easy berserker was a problem child. This made Wu Ming feel awkward. Achilles, you are a man after all. How can you let a woman chase after you and run away? Cough cough. But it was Wu Ming's fault after all, so it was better not to talk about it. Then Wu Ming looked at Rama. Although Rama was already awake, he could still see that he was weak. To use a phrase to describe him, he was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. But it had to be said that Karen's medical skills were superb. But then again, now that all the tools were prepared, Sharon alone was enough to treat Rama. However, to be able to wake Rama up in one night, Wu Ming took another look at Sharon. To be able to teach a disciple who created the elixir of immortality, Karen's reputation as a sage was not to be underestimated. This was because Wu Ming felt that Rama would need at least a few days to wake up after experiencing the magic of the Holy Grail. Just as Wu Ming was pondering, Rama saw that Wu Ming did not speak. After hesitating for a while, he pulled a long face and spoke first. I'm here to thank you. I was reckless when we first met. Thank you for saving my life. Rama was obviously talking about the incident where he threw the relic without hesitation. Although Wu Ming and Carl were on the same side, Wu Ming had just been summoned after all. The kidnapping of Sito probably had nothing to do with Wu Ming. Rama understood this as well. However, as he was too emotional at that time, he ended up harming himself. After all, they are now my subordinates in name. But don't worry, I won't do anything to your Sito anymore. On the contrary, I'll help you to save your Sito. Again, Wu Ming had a good impression of the infatuated man. If possible, Wu Ming did not mind helping him. You're right. They are also your subordinates. When I save Sito, I'll definitely have a good fight with you. As expected of a king, he was still quite cool when he calmed down. All right. I'll be waiting for you. Wu Ming smiled as he extended his hand. Rama was stunned when he saw that. He immediately reacted and extended his hand as well to shake Xian's hand. Gadotsi smiled when she saw that. Both of them seemed to have buried the hatchet. After all, she liked to see them getting along well. If that's the case, there's nothing else. Let's go. Just like that, Wu Ming led Matthew, who was fully armed, and Gadotsi, who kept waving at everyone as they headed west. Of course, Wu Ming and the rest did not need to walk 108,000 miles, nor did they need to face extreme difficulties. However, I feel like we've overlooked something. Wu Ming muttered to himself. In the forest near Riverton, Wu Ming's pseudo-heavenly lock had tied Spartacus up. He was still tied up and could not move at all. Oppressor. Come and give me more pressure. Chapter 492. In the northwest of the Rocky Mountains, a 4 or 5 meter long white deer was jumping on the mountain like a spirit, running towards the west. This white deer was naturally the white deer that Wu Ming sat on before, the vehicle of the Holy Spear Yggdrasil. It was neither alive nor emotionless and was completely controlled by Wuming. After walking for a few minutes, Wuming thought that the speed was too slow and threw his spear to the ground. Then the holy white deer based on Funbaba appeared in front of Gadotsi and Matthew. The appearance of the white deer made the two little girls feel good. After all, the white deer's appearance was still good enough. Then Wuming, Gadotsi and Matthew rode the white deer. Because of the increase in the number of people, the white deer that Wuming summoned was naturally a little bigger, making it more convenient for the three of them to ride. Wuming sat on the back of the white deer, holding Gadotsi in his arms, while Matthew sat behind Wuming and hugged Wuming tightly. Gadotsi closed her eyes and looked carefully. Her breathing was steady. There was no doubt that Gadotsi had fallen asleep. Wuming saw that Gadotsi was sleep-deprived, so he used hypnosis to make Gadotsi fall asleep. Of course, Gadotsi naturally didn't know that. She just felt very sleepy, so Wuming proposed that he could hold Gadotsi and Gadotsi gladly accepted. Wuming still used magic to make Gadotsi's senses change. Even in the violent vibration, Gadotsi felt stable, so the constant jumping of the white deer did not affect Gadotsi's sleep. On the other hand, Mashu was a little scared because of the speed of the white deer, so she hugged Wuming tightly. But after a period of adaptation he got used to it. It was like riding a bus, watching the surrounding scenes receding, but he still hugged Wuming's waist tightly. Matthew's shield was hung on the white deer's tail by Wuming's control. The white deer's tail was like a ponytail. The snow-white long tail tied Matthew's shield, so there was no need to worry about the white deer's running and jumping. After all, the white deer's body was not much bigger, so it was not easy to put a shield on it. The speed of the people riding the white deer was a lot faster. In less than 2 hours, Wuming and the other two were about to leave the Rocky Mountains. In this way we can be considered to have left the territory of the Japanese forces, Wuming said lightly. Along the way Matthew told them about the Holy Grail forces in the Rocky Mountains. According to Matthew, there were no traces of humans in the entire Rocky Mountains. The whole mountain was full of ghosts. There were ghosts with green faces and fangs, and there were also ghosts without bodies. In short, no matter what kind of ghosts they were not something that the humans in the United States could deal with. The ghosts should be the soldiers of the Holy Grail forces. This was what Wuming said to himself when he first heard Matthew's explanation. Celtic had Wuming soldiers, Greece had Dragonfang soldiers, and Rome had Roman soldiers. Just like other forces, Japan also had its own ghost soldiers. The reason why the residents of Riverton allowed the servants to move in was because of the ghosts attacking the humans. The Celtic and Roman troops were not only soldiers, but they were also far away from here. However, the territories of Japan and Greece happened to be on both sides of Riverton. Moreover, ghosts and Dragonfang soldiers were really like wild beasts. Before the servants lived in Riverton, not only Riverton, but also the residents of the Missouri River Valley often suffered from sparse Dragonfang soldiers and ghosts. They only knew how to use guns, so how could they fight against these enhanced version of skeletons and ghosts? Naturally, they needed the help of the servants. Later, when Wuming asked who the leader of the ghosts was, Matthew shook his head. Matthew told Wuming that the one who went to explore the Rocky Mountains was Robin Hood. Because there was no one in the Rocky Mountains, only Robin Hood, who was known as the King of Faceless, had the ability to explore such a place. According to the exploration, Denver was determined to be the gathering place of the Holy Grail forces in Japan. However, he did not enter Denver because Robin Hood had sensed a large amount of poison before he even reached Denver. Robin Hood was also a master of poison, so he was very sensitive to poison. Under the premise of ensuring his own safety, Robin Hood collected some information and left. After that, everyone knew that the Japanese forces were not to be trifled with. At least, not many servants could ignore those poisons. Especially Sharon, who couldn't stand the Hydra's poison and chose to commit suicide. It was estimated that as long as Sharon approached, he would be poisoned to death. Even Kyoheim, who was originally a member of the Japanese forces, didn't know. When Kyoheim was summoned by the Holy Grail again, she didn't even pay attention to the leader of the Japanese forces and directly left the Rocky Mountains. Coincidentally, no one stopped Kyoheim, so she was released. In this way, Kyoheim, who pursued her love, betrayed her original side without any information. Perhaps because of this reason, Kyoheim was a little more honest. However, in Kyoheim's words, all of this was for love, for Kyoheim's Anjin-sama. In short, even Matthew didn't know the specific situation of the Japanese forces. However, Wuming had some idea in his mind. Japan, leader, ghost, poison, he could only think of Shitendaji. I don't know if Shitendaji here has the memory of burning Winterwood City. If so, it would be difficult to deal with. Wuming didn't know Shitendaji. Apart from the historical records, Wuming only knew that she was a female ghost who could eat people, drink wine, and didn't care about trifles. Yes, and the most important point, she did things completely according to her preferences. If she was persistent, she wouldn't let others feel comfortable even if she died. From the poisonous wine gourd in Winterwood City, it could be seen that Shitendaji, who used all her strength to release her noble phantasm, really disgusted Wuming. It really confirmed that sentence: even if she died, she wouldn't feel at ease. It's better to leave here quickly. Thinking like this, Wuming controlled the white deer to speed up a little, wanting to leave this junction quickly. After Wuming and others left the Rocky Mountains, in the place where Wuming and others were just now, a purple and quite exposed figure appeared. Hee, what a delicious smell. After leaving the Rocky Mountains, Wuming was temporarily relieved. Fortunately, there was no Shitendaji who blocked the road to rob them. Then Wuming and others entered a flat area that looked like a plain but was actually a plateau. Chapter 493. In fact, the Cordillera was not the name of a mountain. Its full name was the Cordillera Mountains. To be precise, the Rocky Mountains were also part of the Cordillera Mountains, but in order to distinguish the territories of the Japanese forces and the American forces, the two were separated. The Japanese forces were like a stickler to the rules. They only occupied the eastern Rocky Mountains, the highest part of the Cordillera Mountains, and had no intention of expanding their forces. Otherwise, Maeve wouldn't be unable to find any information. After all, even the servants of Riverton, the neighbor of the Japanese forces, didn't clearly inquire about the Japanese forces. Apart from the Rocky Mountains, which were the tallest and largest, the Cordillera Mountains were left with the Central Plateau Basin and the Western Pacific Rim Mountains. At this moment, Wuming and the other two entered the Central Plateau Basin area. At this moment, Wuming temporarily stopped the white deer. If I remember correctly, following this river may be a place called Boise. Wuming thought and said to Matthew. Gadatsi, on the other hand, was still sleeping. Senpai Cylinder, I am not very familiar with the terrain here. Matthew's face was slightly red and said slowly. However, Senpai Cylinder was right, Matthew thought. It doesn't matter if you don't know, the point is that we may have to fight with the American forces. Wuming narrowed his eyes. Hey. So soon? Do we need to wake Senpai up? Matthew obviously didn't expect to contact the American forces so soon, so he asked Wuming if he should wake Gadatsi up. There's no rush now. There's still some distance before we reach Boise. Let her sleep for a while longer. Wuming caressed Gadatsi's hair lovingly. Looking at the sleeping face, Wuming felt like raising a daughter. Senpai Cylinder is really gentle to Senpai. Matthew didn't know if he was envious or gratified. Seeing Matthew like this, Wuming smiled helplessly. Then he spoke to Matthew. Of course, I'm also very gentle with you. Wuming raised his hand and stroked Matthew's short hair. After all, Matthew was also a little girl worthy of love, not to mention. Matthew, you have inherited the power of Galahad. Galahad and I have a special relationship. Wuming's words stunned Matthew. Could it be that Senior Cylinder had another identity? Matthew was puzzled. Although Matthew wasn't a particularly smart person, he wasn't stupid either. Judging from the dual identities of Jack the Ripper and Cylinder, he was definitely not an ordinary person. In that case, Galahad was related to him. Could he be a Knight of the Round Table? Then, just as Matthew's thoughts were running wild, Wuming spoke again. Of course, even without Galahad's power, I would still be gentle to you. He pressed Matthew's little head a little harder and pulled Matthew out of his thoughts. Then let's go. Let's fight them first. Eh? Then Wuming drove the white deer again. The white deer carried Gadatsi, who was sleeping soundly in Wuming's arms, Wuming, who was full of fighting spirit, and the confused Matthew as they moved quickly toward Boise. When they were still a short distance away from Boise, Wuming deactivated the white deer state of the Holy Lance. It wasn't to show his sincerity, but because he had encountered an enemy. Then a minute later. Slash dash. Boom dash. The last robot infantry was cut in half with one shot. With the explosion, the 100-man robot infantry unit disappeared from this singularity. Gadatsi and Matthew were stunned as they watched Wuming walk out of the explosion with a comfortable expression. From the moment the three of them encountered the 100-man robot infantry unit, Wuming gently woke Gadatsi up, Matthew and Gadatsi got off the deer, and the white deer turned into the Holy Lance. It took almost 30 seconds. Then, when Matthew wanted to fight these robot infantry with Wuming, they saw how quickly they were dealt with as if they were vegetables. Strictly speaking, Wuming needed to kill at least 3 or 4 robot infantry per second, and that was strictly according to 30 seconds. Of course, it must have been less than 30 seconds. Because in the battle just now, Wuming killed more than a dozen robot infantry with one shot more than once. Let's go, it's time to meet the servant. Forget it, it's over anyway. With this in mind, Gadotsi and Matthew smiled awkwardly, then followed Wuming to Boise. After walking for almost a minute or two, Gadotsi and Matthew noticed the fortress-like town in front of them, and a white-haired man holding a golden lance and wearing golden armor standing alone in front of the fortress with his eyes closed. Karna. Gadotsi and Matthew didn't know this person. After all, Gadotsi and Matthew didn't see Karna when they were in Winterwood City. At the beginning of the battle between Karna and Gilgamesh, Gadotsi naturally didn't have the chance to see it. Later, when everyone went to the Yuzong Mountain, Karna only appeared to snipe Gilgamesh, but he was quickly rescued by Marshal Gilda Rice. After that, because of Astrio's noble phantasm, Gadotsi and Matthew didn't see Karna. After that, Karna was eliminated by Gilgamesh. It had to be said that this was a really sad story. Because of this, when Gadotsi and Mashu saw the white-haired man with golden armor and golden spear, they didn't recognize him. However, this didn't prevent Wuming from knowing Karna. Whether it was the Battle of the 14 Riders or the burning Winterwood City, Wuming had contact with him. In the Battle of the 14 Riders, Wuming defeated Karna by cheating. In Winterwood City, because of his rank, Gilgamesh replaced Wuming to fight Karna and defeated him in the end. Wuming wanted to laugh. He was almost the same as Zhou. He was on the opposite side of Karna and he was always beating Karna. However, to be able to meet Karna 3 times outside the Martyr's Palace, it could be said that it was fate. He just didn't know if this Karna had Wuming's memories. However, Garna of Fuyuki City has the memories of the battle between the 14 Riders and the 14 Riders, because Wuming felt that Garna also has the memories of those 2 battles. Sure enough, you are also in this singularity. Karna opened his eyes and looked at Wuming. Sure enough, Karna remembered Wuming. I didn't expect that we would meet again. It's really fate, Karna. Wuming smiled. Karna also nodded, then looked at his hand that wasn't holding the spear. Yes, the identity of a servant can really make such miracles happen. When Wuming and Karna were chatting, Gadotsi was indeed shocked. Karna? The god-killing hero who was defeated by the Hero King before I even met him. Now I see him in person. After all, she didn't see his real face last time, so Gadotsi was quite regretful. Indeed, I can feel a very dangerous aura from Mr. Karna. It's like the fire of the sun that can burn everything. Matthew said solemnly as he sensed the magic power that Karna was gradually emitting. He was ready to protect his master with his shield. By the way, I feel that Karna and Assassin are close. Why don't you do us a favor and let us pass? Gadotsi looked at Karna with a smile. Is this the master of Chaldea? Although he looks trustworthy, he's still a bit immature. Karna glanced at Gadotsi expressionlessly. Then Karna waved his golden spear at Wuming. I've already accepted Edison's request and worked for him. He asked me to guard this place. Gadotsi, who felt that things were going to fall through, looked a little depressed. But if it's him, I can let him pass. It seemed that Karna had some understanding of Wuming after many competitions, and it was a positive understanding. Just as Gadotsi's sadness turned into joy, Karna spoke again. But it's rare for us to meet. It's not right to let him pass without a fight. With that, Karna rushed at Wuming. Then Gadotsi's face turned green. She felt like she had been tricked. To put it bluntly, we still have to fight, right? I'm already prepared. Wuming laughed and faced the incoming Karna. The third battle between the Scorching Golden Spear user and the Holy Silver Spear user had begun. Chapter 494. Clang, clang, clang. The ear-piercing sounds of metal colliding echoed in the air. Off, off, off. Flames raged on the ground in front of the main gate of the fortress like meteorites falling from the sky. The walls of the fortress nearby also showed signs of damage. Hum. As if the air was vibrating, countless rays of light and flames clashed with each other. The figures of flames and meteors kept intertwining. The tip of the spear accompanied by flames and the tip of the spear accompanied by holy light could be vaguely seen. Obviously, that was where the sounds of metal colliding came from. Due to Karna's sudden attack, Wuming didn't back down and counterattacked. This battle implicated Matthew and Gadotsi for no reason. This was because as long as Gadotsi showed the attitude of negotiating with him, Karna would definitely not attack again. However, this time Wuming was involved. Although he had joked that Wu-ming was like Zhou to Karna, in fact Karna did have some feelings for him. After all, even a saint would be prejudiced if he kept losing to the same person, let alone Karna. As a result, Karna and Wu-ming fought for the third time. Both the overflowing magic power and the airwaves caused by the battle affected a shield on the battlefield. The shield kept shaking and seemed to be in danger. Ugh. Matthew put his shield in front of him and struggled to resist, protecting Gidatsi behind him. The blade of the shield extended out from the bottom and stabbed deeply into the ground. One could vaguely see a thick layer of magic power attached to the shield. It was Matthew's magic defense skill, which had the same nature as magic release, except that magic defense was used for defense, while magic release was used for attack. However, even so, the current situation was quite bad for Matthew. Karna's sudden attack during the conversation and Wu-ming's counterattack were all carried out under the premise that Gidatsi and Matthew hadn't retreated to a safe range. In the beginning, Karna paid attention to Gidatsi's safety. After all, he wasn't a criminal. Wu-ming was the same. His love for Gidatsi naturally made Wu-ming pay attention to Gidatsi's safety. However, the two of them were extraordinary figures after all. Originally they wanted to hold back, but now it became a battle where they gradually increased their strength. Realizing that she might get hurt if she continued to watch, Matthew wanted to take Gidatsi further away. However, before Matthew could take Gidatsi out of the danger zone, the aftermath of flames, holy light, air waves and storms swept over. It was precisely because of this that the city walls of Boise City had become so dilapidated. Now Gidatsi could only hide behind Matthew's shield. Once she left the protection of the shield, Gidatsi would probably be blown away in an instant. At this time Roman, who was paying attention to this place, turned on the virtual screen and projected it to Gidatsi's side. Sure enough, Sarand and Karna are both exceptional servants. The aftermath of a battle of this level can't be ignored. Roman said to himself and nodded. Doctor, you better not talk too much. Can't you see that Matthew is already having a hard time? Gidatsi looked at the virtual screen beside her with disgust. Yes. Just by being called out by Gidatsi, Roman had once again returned to his cowardly and timid appearance. However, Gidatsi could shout from here, which showed that Matthew was well protected. However, even if she could only be protected, Gidatsi wouldn't just stay behind Matthew. Now Matthew's hand holding the shield was already covered by Gidatsi's hand. Feeling the warmth of Matthew's hand, although his body was very tired, Matthew's heart was incomparably firm. Although it seemed that Matthew couldn't hold on any longer, his shield could still continue to resist the aftermath of the two exceptional servants. There was nothing that the sacred round table couldn't resist. Doctor, is there no way to stop them? Gidatsi roared like a child. However, this was a last resort. Although they didn't know why Boise City had become a steel fortress, the steel fortress had collapsed under the battle between Wu-ming and Karna. That's right, the walls of the fortress that was in good condition just now had been broken, and a few mechanical infantry could be seen faintly falling down. Not only that, but the ground where Matthew and Gidatsi were standing also began to crack. If they waited for Wu-ming and Karna to fight for a while longer, there was no doubt that the two of them who had released their noble phantoms would destroy the fortress. What can I do? Roman scratched the back of his head weakly. At this moment, Wu-ming and Karna separated, and the fight naturally stopped. However, this also proved that the two of them weren't too immersed in the joy of fighting. If we don't release our noble phantoms, we won't be able to determine the winner in a short period of time, Karna said lightly. After all, during the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, Wu-ming and Karna couldn't determine the winner in terms of martial arts, so they still had to rely on their noble phantoms. When he said that, Gidatsi, Matthew and Roman were shocked. If he released his noble phantoms, Gidatsi and Matthew would be in trouble. Even so, you and I don't want to release our noble phantoms, right? Wu-ming threw the spear in his hand, and the spear turned into white light and merged into his body. That was not the real holy spear Yggdrasil, but a noble phantoms based on the identity of the Holy King. After all, the real Yggdrasil was still in Uruk. Moreover, this time it's not pure martial arts. Your flame and my light are not simple things just like this. Wu-ming raised one of his hands and a white light emerged. However, unlike the holy light in the past, this time, the light in Wu-ming's hand was full of cruel charm. Just like the church organization in fantasy novels, there were many gentle and amiable church members, but there were also church members who were responsible for judgment. At this moment, Wu-ming's light was in such a form. This time I won. Wu-ming smiled slightly at Karna. After Wu-ming finished speaking, Karna did not answer but fell into silence. I feel that assassin's aura is a little different. It's a bit serious. Is it an illusion? Gadatsi approached Wuming and looked at the light in confusion. Maybe it's really like what Senpai Selander said, these lights are not simple things. Matthew also came over. Matthew and Gadatsi, one on the left and one on the right side of Wuming, looked at the light. At this moment, Matthew had already put down his shield, and the two had already begun to move toward Wuming. Some of the conversation between Wuming and Karna naturally fell into the ears of Gadatsi and Matthew. Indeed, the current you is somewhat different from the two you that I met before. This time I have indeed lost. Cough cough. After that Karna coughed and blood came out of his mouth. Chapter 495. Although Karna was coughing up blood, his face did not change much. He was still pale because he was a Caucasian. After calmly wiping away the blood that he had coughed up, Karna put away his golden spear. However, unlike Wuming, he could not put the spear back into his body. Instead, he made the golden spear disappear into the air as if it was spiritualized. However, at this moment Roman was a little uneasy. Are you for real? Karna was beaten to the point of vomiting blood. Roman looked at Wuming in surprise. Well, doctor, what's so strange about that? Matthew, the good student, raised his hand and asked. Karna has the golden armor given to him by the Indian sun god, Surya. It's safe to say that almost nobody can hurt him, Roman answered Matthew's question. At this moment, Karna continued Roman's words. That's right. My armor can block 90% of the damage. Even if it's a grade A+ military relic, I can still take it head-on. Hearing Karna's confession, Gadatsi, Matthew, and even Roman were shocked. It was amazing that he could take a hit from a grade A+ relic. Even Wuming, who already knew the truth, thought that Karna was cheating. Even Wuming himself did not think that Karna was as crazy as he was. After adding the Lune rune to his armor, it could only take on a grade A relic at most. The grade A+ relic that Karna mentioned must be a relic that had been doubled. Wuming would not be able to take it. However, this was under the premise that Wuming did not resist and took it head-on. For Wuming, if he really encountered a grade A+ military relic, he would just consume a lot of mana and throw it out. If one was not enough, he would throw out 2 or 3. After all, Wuming's mana was almost unlimited. He could just use it to make babies. Of course, Karna's cheating couldn't be stopped. Other than that, the armor also has the ability to automatically repair injuries, and I can also use my flames to burn away foreign objects or negative effects in my body. As he spoke, flames began to appear in Karna's body just as he said. A few wisps of smoke rose from Karna's body and disappeared into the air. I've already eliminated the light in my body. Without the source of damage, the wounds in my body have already begun to heal. He had to admit that the clear debuff skill was really useful. In fact, even if Karna didn't burn the light with flames, Wuming would have removed it anyway. First of all, as we saw earlier, even without Wuming, Karna could have made contact on his own. Secondly, there was no need to keep the light. Hostage-type methods wouldn't work on Karna at all, even if the hostage was himself. Lastly, since we're about to form an alliance, fighting and killing isn't good, smiley face. So powerful. Gadatsi said blankly. Matthew also nodded. Seeing the two of them like this, Karna shook his head expressionlessly. Even so, he still hurt me. Of course, Karna had to be talking about Wuming. Well, it's just a little trick. It's not worth mentioning. Wuming smiled and created a ball of light in his hand. Karna's armor was bestowed by the Indian sun god, Surya. It was said that this invincible armor was made of light, so even the gods couldn't hurt Karna at all. However, Wuming's current method was light. Karna's sunlight armor was able to block countless attacks. It could even defend against light elemental attacks. In other words, as long as there was no damage, it wouldn't defend. Therefore, in the face of Wuming's light, Karna's armor was completely unaffected. In Wuming's eyes, Karna's armor was like a piece of armor with a large gap. He could deal damage just by stabbing the air. In other words, Karna was naked in front of Wuming. Cough cough. Back to the topic, Wuming used the characteristics of light to temporarily pass through Karna's armor and into Karna's body. Then, after the light entered Karna's body, it exploded and created an extremely harsh judgment aura. It destroyed Karna's body from the inside, which was why Karna was injured. After all, Karna couldn't defend against internal damage. However, Karna shook his head. You're stronger than me. Then Karna told him the reason. Let's not talk about the second time we met. The first time we fought, I lost. Gadotsi, Matthew, and the others also understood something. Wuming had met Karna in other places and defeated him, and Karna still had the memory of being defeated. However, Wuming shook his head with a wry smile. In the beginning, Wuming was able to defeat Karna by relying on the help of suppression, his own skills, and the protection of the golden armor. The suppression allowed Wuming to obtain a powerful noble phantasm that surpassed Karna's god-killing spear. His own skill, Holy Fire Erosion, made him a human, which allowed Wuming to deal additional damage to Karna. In the end, Karna took off his golden armor. Without that layer of absolute defense, Karna really had no defense at all. The powerful power of Wuming and Karna's ultimate noble phantasm directly shattered Karna's spirit core, and that was how Wuming won. In the burning Winterwood City, it was Gilgamesh who fought against Karna. Just Enkidu alone was enough to restrain Karna, not to mention that Gilgamesh could also use his noble phantasm. If Gilgamesh specifically picked some noble phantasm that could ignore defense, then Karna would be a piece of cake. However, Karna was indeed worthy of being called the strongest servant. He managed to damage Gilgamesh's spirit core before he left the stage. Although Gilgamesh won because of a moment of carelessness, his spirit core was also damaged by Karna. This showed how powerful Karna was, coupled with Karna's handsomeness and obedience, he was simply perfect as a servant. Wuming smiled helplessly. In that case, since you've already lost, can you take us to see President Wang Edison? We came here with the sincerity of an alliance. The fight was over, Karna had admitted defeat and Gadotsi and Matthew were fine. In that case, it was time to talk about business. I was so focused on watching the two of you fight that I forgot the purpose of coming here. Wow. Roman said weakly. Then he was looked at with disdain by everyone. Since you only want an alliance, then I'll naturally take you there. After Karna finished speaking, he was ready to take Wuming and the others to see the President Wang. Is everything okay here? Gadotsi said cautiously. The steel city of Sabwasi had been turned into ruins, and a large amount of steel could be vaguely seen mixed in it. Those were the remnants of the mechanized infantry. No need, there's no living person here, and this fortress is actually just for decoration. It won't be long before the mechanized infantry comes to repair it. Good Lord, this place that was originally an ordinary town turned into a steel fortress. It was probably built and constructed by the mechanized infantry that Karna mentioned. It had to be said that robots were useful. They were emotionless, tireless, and calm. If the number was increased, they could even kill a third-rate servant. Of course, because the President Wang didn't have the Holy Grail, these mechanized infantry were much weaker than the other forces. However, no force was willing to deal with the UA forces, so there was no need to be too nervous. Let's go, it's a bit far from San Francisco. Let's try to get there before dark. After that, Karna jumped and left. There was no need to worry about losing him. The servant's aura was very obvious, so Wuming was not in a hurry. Then I'll turn off the screen first. After that, Roman's figure disappeared in front of them. Let's follow him. After that, Wuming pressed his hand on the ground and a white deer appeared. It was the one he rode before. Then Wuming, Gadotsi, and Matthew sat together again. But this time there was no sign of Gadotsi sleeping. In this way, Wuming's plan to go west came to an end. Chapter 496. Wuming, Gadotsi, and Matthew rode the white deer and followed Karna. Although Karna ran very fast, the white deer controlled by Wuming was not slow either. Hence, Karna had no intention of slowing down, or rather, he had no intention of slowing down from the beginning. In this way, with Karna's pass, Wuming and the others could be said to have a smooth journey. Witnessing the scene of the mechanical kingdom along the way, Gadotsi and Matthew were quite surprised. Even Wuming was a little surprised. Along the way, basically every town had become a steel fortress just like a modern town. Every city had stable residents, and there were also a small number of mechanical infantry. Other than that, there were a large number of mines in the central and western part of the Cordillera Mountains. There were a large number of mechanical infantry with all sorts of tools such as picks, shovels, chisels, and so on. Countless minerals were being transported in the direction of San Francisco. Wuming guessed that it was likely to be the raw materials for the production of mechanical infantry. I'm afraid that these mechanical infantry were created by Edison. This was Wuming's judgment at that time. However, both Gadotsi and Matthew felt that it was right. After all, Edison was an inventor, and it was not unacceptable for him to produce these mechanical infantry through noble relics or skills. After all, they were servants, and the definition of ordinary people lost its effect. Indeed, these mechanical infantry were all created by Edison alone. Karna also nodded. However, Wu Ming was quite concerned about this sentence. They were created by one person and there were so many of them. Although the strength of these mechanical infantry could not compete with the soldiers of other forces at all, and could even be said to be crushed, these mechanical infantry were equipped with special equipment. Most of these mechanical infantry were mainly armed with machine guns, and Wu Ming could feel the magic and threat from these machine guns. Previously, when Wu Ming and the others were attacked by a team of 100 mechanical infantry, those mechanical infantry used machine guns. Wu Ming, who took a few hits, could determine that although there was not much magic and the threat was very small, there was no doubt that those machine guns were comparable to low-level noble relics. On the shells of those mechanical infantry, Wu Ming also felt the same magic, so Wu Ming speculated that the shells of these mechanical infantry were also comparable to low-level defensive noble relics, and could even be used to hit people. However, even so, they could not resist Wu Ming's spear. A low-level noble relic was a low-level noble relic. Wu Ming's spear was enchanted, and piercing these mechanical infantry was as easy as piercing paper. Of course, even if he didn't add magic to the weapon, it wouldn't be too difficult to stab with the spear. It would only be like piercing through cardboard. It was precisely because of this that the team of 100 mechanical infantry they encountered earlier was so easily annihilated by Wu Ming. However, if compared to the soldiers of the other forces, it was almost enough. After all, mechanical infantry used machine guns, and this was the only force that used firearms among the several forces. Although they could also compete in numbers, the other forces were blessed by the Holy Grail, so it was obviously unwise to compete in numbers. Of course, if Edison's production speed was enough to rival the other forces blessed by the Holy Grail, or even surpass them, it was not impossible to compete in numbers. Wu Ming still remembered the incident where Edison only slept for 3 to 4 hours when he was alive. On the way he even joked, maybe this incident was sublimated into his noble relic or skill. Although it did become Edison's noble relic or skill. And it was Edison who told them personally after the success of the joint operation. We're here. San Francisco is right in front of us, the base camp of our force. Karna stopped and said to Wu Ming and the others behind him. Looking at the gradually darkening sky, Wu Ming felt that with Karna leading the way, it would indeed save them a lot of effort. Although Wu Ming also knew that Edison's base camp was in San Francisco, and he also knew the general location, he had not been to this place before. Compared to fumbling around on his own, it would be faster to have a familiar person leading the way. Then let's go, get ready to form an alliance with Edison. Then, the four of them entered San Francisco together and came to a palace-like house. Although it looked like a luxurious house from the outside, the interior was not that outstanding. The structural materials were just like an ordinary house. The only difference was that the interior space was not small. This should be Edison's office or laboratory. Wu Ming guessed. Then, under Karna's lead, they came to a house that looked like a living room. There were ordinary wooden sofas, ordinary tables, ordinary tea sets, and ordinary plain water. It seemed that after Edison was driven here, he did not have a good time. Wu Ming thought. Or rather, Edison did not deliberately pay attention to these things. Then where did his attention go? Of course, it was on the mechanical infantry. After Karna entertained Wu Ming and the others for a while, he let Wu Ming and the others stay here alone. Then Karna left, probably to find Edison. However, it was really fortunate that it was Karna. If it were someone else, even if Wu Ming and the others said that they wanted to negotiate, the other party would not let Wu Ming and the others sit here like this. No matter what, he had to find someone to look after Wu Ming and the others. After all, it was not completely determined whether Wu Ming and the others were really here to form an alliance. What if Wu Ming and the others had other purposes and took advantage of Karna's absence to carry it out? Only Karna, who had the skill of the poor, dared to do this. Poor's knowledge. Karna was lucky enough to ask the weak about their lives and values. He could see through the other party's character and attributes, and he would not be deceived by verbal excuses. In addition to not being deceived by falsehood, he also had the characteristic of not being deceived by false words. Karna could tell that Wu Ming and the others were not lying through this skill. Coupled with Karna's understanding of Wu Ming, he was very relieved to let these outsiders stay here alone. I can only say that as expected of Karna. Wu Ming drank a mouthful of plain water and said indifferently. Gadotsi and Matthew were stunned by Wu Ming's sudden words. Assassin, what did you just say? Why don't I understand? Gadotsi naturally would not hide her doubts in her heart and asked directly. It's nothing. I just figured out some things. It's nothing to worry about. Ming then smiled helplessly and waved his hand, indicating that they should not worry about him. Since Ming said so, Gadotsi and Matthew naturally did not pay any more attention to him. At this moment, the door of the room was opened and a strong blue lion head walked in. Chapter 497. The door was pushed open, and a strange creature with the body of a human and the head of a lion walked in. The newcomer was dressed in blue tights. His muscles were bulging and he seemed to be quite powerful. He wore red gloves with silver edges and dark brown men's boots. He also had a red cape with white stripes that reached his ankles from the back of his waist to the side of his waist. There was a metal plate on his chest that looked like the mouth of an energy cannon, and there were stripes around it that looked like a hero who fought monsters. There were 2 large bulbs on his shoulders, but the most eye-catching thing was the white lion's head. Oh, is this the master of Chaldea? It's an honor to meet you. With your help, our wishes will come true. The lion's head spoke in a lion's voice as soon as it appeared. Gadotsi and Mashu were stunned when they saw the lion's head, because the contrast was too big. Now they felt like they were watching a comedy. Ming was also curious about the lion's head, but he was not as stunned as Gadotsi. You must be President Wang Edison. Gadotsi and Matthew widened their eyes as soon as Ming finished speaking. They looked at Ming as if they had gone crazy. Ming pretended that he did not see them, and the lion's head, Edison, did not notice Gadotsi and Matthew's expressions. He was looking at Ming. Oh, you're right. I'm the symbol of America. I'm the king of all presidents. I am Edison. Then Edison struck a pose on his own. Gadotsi and Matthew did not know what to do. It was too awkward. Yes. President Wang, please move aside. Your body is too big. Then an intellectual female voice was heard. Oh, sorry. With that, Edison walked towards the interior of the room. It turned out that Edison stopped to talk to Gadotsi and the others as soon as he opened the door. Coupled with Edison, who had undergone some sort of mutation, this overly tall body completely blocked the door. Now Edison moved aside, revealing the people behind him. Karna walked in with a petite but intellectual woman. Gadotsi and Matthew were thinking, finally, there's a normal person here. The woman began to introduce herself. Hello, I'm Helena Blavatsky. I'm Edison's friend. You can call me Helena. Helena smiled at Gadotsi and the others. It had to be said that Helena was quite approachable. Anyway, Gadotsi and Mashu had calmed down now. Hello, Madam Helena. I'm Tachika Fujimaru and this is Matthew Gillett. Nice to meet you, Gadotsi said happily. Hello, madam, Matthew said politely to Helena. Sure enough, compared to the cold-hearted Karna and the lion-headed Edison, the gentle and intellectual Helena was more likable. Ah, what an obedient child. Helena also nodded with a smile. Ahem. Edison coughed. Of course, this meeting was not a friend meeting, but a joint negotiation. A faint smile appeared on Helena's face upon seeing this, and she took a position behind Edison. By the way, Karna, who had remained silent this entire time, was already standing behind Edison. Since when did Edison value power so much? Ming saw this clear master-slave relationship, but Ming didn't say anything. Then Edison spoke. So, Master of Chaldea, let us begin the negotiations on the alliance. Then Edison sat opposite Gadotsi, and Helena and Karna stood behind him like guards. The atmosphere changed instantly. In order to not lose their dignity, Matthew and Ming went behind Gadotsi together. Now, Edison and Gadotsi were sitting opposite each other, Karna and Helena were facing Ming, and Matthew was standing behind Edison and Gadotsi. One had to know that a negotiation would only be a joint negotiation if they were equal in strength. If they were not, it would be annexation. However, Gadotsi was a master who had experienced the terrifying aura of the Magic King in the 4th chapter. After all, just the current atmosphere was not enough to scare Gadotsi. Gadotsi looked at Ming, and Ming smiled and nodded in encouragement. Then Gadotsi spoke. Well, Mr. Edison, I think we have the same goal, which is to defeat the other forces and seize the Holy Grail. Therefore, I think we can work together. Seeing Gadotsi state her goal in an orderly manner without being scared by the atmosphere, Ming was extremely gratified. Of course, Gadotsi's junior, Matthew, and Roman, who had been silent and had not shown his virtual screen, were also gratified. This was what Ming had told Roman on the way. Roman's face and voice seemed to have the ability to taunt. In addition, Ming felt that Gadotsi needed to be trained, so he told Roman not to appear and hear. After thinking about it, Roman agreed. After asking Wuming to take care of Gadotsi, he went into hiding. However, he could still hear everyone's conversation. There was no need to hide this, so Wuming did not say anything. Edison nodded and expressed his affirmation. Well, I see. We can work together, but I'm not going to take the initiative to attack. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Although he said, I'm sorry to disappoint you, Edison's face did not show the slightest hint of apology. What? Matthew was obviously surprised by this answer. That's right, Mr. Edison. Although there are only a few of us this time, I'm here to work with you on behalf of the servants who are alone. We have gathered Sharon, Achilles, Nightingale, Geronimo, and many other servants. I believe that we can save this era if we work together. Hearing Gadotsi's words, Edison was not surprised. Instead, he touched his chin and thought, oh, there are heroes like Achilles, Sharon, and I didn't expect Ms. Nightingale to be with you. Then Helena opened her mouth and explained to Gadotsi. Actually, Ms. Nightingale used to be one of us. Due to the arrival of several new forces, our camp was forced to retreat to this place. Ms. Nightingale didn't retreat because of her unique personality. I thought she had already left. After a pause, Helena continued. In fact, we also have many servants, but we lost a lot of them when we fought with the Celtic side and the 3 new forces. At present, there are only 3 of us left. We thought Ms. Nightingale had left, but we didn't expect her to still be here. Edison didn't stop Helena from exposing his family's information. After all, there was no point in lying about this. A little investigation would reveal that for someone who was at the end of their rope, hiding their trump card would be a foolish move to bring their trump card to hell. However, what Helena meant was that Edison was concerned about the fact that Nightingale was still alive. In that case, why don't we join forces to fight? It's better than being swallowed in the end. Gadotsi was a little puzzled. In the first few singularities, except for the enemy servants, basically all the servants they encountered would join their side, and then everyone would win the Holy Grail together and solve the singularities. But this time the president, Wang Edison, chose to escape and avoid the war, which really made Gadotsi confused. I am preparing to accumulate strength, and when the other forces are defeated, we will take them down together, haha. As if he had come up with a perfect plan for himself, Edison laughed happily. In other words, Edison was preparing to go into a defensive mode to prepare for battle. However, it could only be said that he was worthy of being an inventor's brain, and he really didn't know anything about war. I don't know if Helena knows this or is really hiding it, but Karna must be hiding himself, so he didn't tell Edison. So, Edison, what if the other forces join forces to destroy you first? Wuming said directly without even using honorifics, and told Edison what Karna didn't say. Huh. Looking at Edison, who was a little stunned by his straightforward words, the corners of Wuming's mouth rose slightly. He was prepared to cooperate with Gadotsi to play the role of the good cop while he played the role of the bad cop and put on a 2-man show. Chapter 498. Well, Edison obviously realized the problem after hearing Wuming's words. After all, isn't it best to get rid of the onlookers in a war? Wuming said as he glanced at Karna. However, Karna didn't move at all. He was just like a tool. Then, looking at the helpless expression on the lion's face, Wuming continued. Although Karna is indeed an exceptional servant, if the other forces join forces and send a few first-rate servants to stall him, then only you and Helena will be left. Do you think you can resist the attacks of 2 or even 3 forces? Wuming said as he walked toward Edison. Karna and Helena didn't move either. Wuming's words made Edison even more speechless. Karna still didn't say anything like a tool. Helena seemed to want to say something, but in the end she still didn't say anything. This sentence pointed out the biggest weakness of Edison's group at the moment. They didn't have high-end combat power. Regardless of whether it was Helena or Edison, Wuming didn't think that they would be able to last more than a few rounds under his gun even if they fought with their lives on the line. At most, they would be able to last 5 rounds. It could be said that if it weren't for Karna, Wuming would have been able to instantly kill the 2 of them. Of course, Wuming didn't have such thoughts. But since that was the case, it meant that only someone could stall Karna, and if a few more powerful servants came, then Edison and Helena would be dead for sure. I've seen a lot of powerful servants from other forces. The demigod hero Hercules, the huntress Atalanta, the traitorous witch Medea, the Roman Emperor Julius Caesar, and the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra. Do you really think you can resist their combined forces? Wuming was getting closer and closer to Edison. But, they might not join forces. Edison's lion face looked very weak. Indeed, but don't forget, those are only the enemy servants I've identified so far. In Denver there is also the king of ghosts, Shitendaji, who is suspected to be the commander of thousands of ghosts. You won't believe me if I say that Shitendaji has no other servants under his command. In addition, I don't think the Greek forces only have a few servants. There must be more powerful ones behind them, and Rome, which can fight Greece so well, must have other powerful servants. Well, the reason why Greece and Rome could fight so well was that neither side had the intention to start a decisive battle. After all, there were still other forces eyeing them covetously. Wu Ming believed that if both sides were to fight to the death, the Greek side would have the upper hand. That was because the Greek side was more mysterious than the Roman side. Of course, this was only a guess at the moment. After all, they had not completely confirmed the hidden means of both sides. Wu Ming also relied on this information that Edison didn't know to be able to scare him. Then Wu Ming continued to speak word by word seriously. Do you think that you can resist Karna, your robots, and the fortresses that can be destroyed easily in a battle? You think that you can resist Karna, your robots, and your fortresses? Karna asked with a smile. Wu Ming said while walking, and he had already walked in front of Edison, staring at his lion face. Even so, Helena and Karna still didn't move, as if they trusted Wu Ming very much, or they really regarded themselves as tools called servants. Wu Ming's words that did not leave a way out mercilessly poked at Edison's soft spot. In fact, Edison already knew in his heart that if there was an enemy attack, with his super weak individual combat ability, other forces might not be able to resist. No, it should be him, and Helena was naturally the same. If Karna was held back, then they would definitely fail. That was why Edison wished he could spend an extra hour a day, a total of 25 hours making mechanical infantry day and night. And those towns and fortresses were built for this reason. Otherwise, he would really have no sense of security. He knew all this, but he was subconsciously unwilling to admit it. I still have the Superman potion that I have painstakingly developed. As long as I inject this into my body, I can get the power of a superclass servant. Edison said excitedly, and he took a tube of colorful potion from nowhere. Then, bang! Wu Ming grabbed the tube of Superman potion in an instant, and with a hand that seemed to be holding on to magic, he threw the tube to the ground and crushed it. Now you don't have it. Wu Ming still stared at Edison's lion face, and said this shameless sentence very calmly. But even so, in Wu Ming's vague prying, Karna and Helena still didn't move, and Helena even breathed a sigh of relief. In an instant, Wu Ming seemed to have understood something. Poor Lionhead. Not only was he tricked by the enemy, but he was also tricked by his own people. But this was indeed for his own good. However, at this moment, Edison had no time to care about others. Edison speechlessly looked at the Superman potion on the ground that had lost its color and was gradually drying up. That was the only tube of Superman potion left. Looking at the Superman potion that was gradually seeping into the ground and slowly disappearing, Edison really had no power at all now. By the way, I'm here on behalf of the Celtic forces to ally with you. I have already joined forces with the Master of Chaldea to save this singularity. How is that possible? Edison was shocked after hearing this. You barbarians don't know how to ally. Edison seemed to have a deep grudge against the Celts, so when he knew that Wu Ming was on the Celtic side, he was extremely excited and returned to his previous state. This time, even Helena's face showed a hint of surprise. It seemed that Karna didn't tell them that Wu Ming was on the Celtic side. Wait a minute, Wu Ming remembered something. It seemed that he didn't tell Karna and Wu Ming that he was on the Celtic side. I know that you have a deep hostility against the Celts. After all, this singularity was originally a war between the Celts and the United States, so the hatred between the two sides would certainly grow. Although the servants were indeed dead, and they would only return to the martyr's palace when they died again, in the eyes of Edison and the others, the Celts were still quite hateful because they killed many of their servants. But the Celts didn't think that way. It was the law of the jungle. As expected of the Celtic barbarians. But there is a saying that there are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. But compared to interests, I want to be friends with you. Edison stared blankly at Wu Ming's sincere eyes, somewhat at a loss. Mr. Edison, you may not know, but I have become partners with many servants in the first 4 singularities. I really like them, they have the courage to be heroes. At this time, Gadazzi spoke in a timely manner. Miss Jean, who lost her power, still acted with us for the sake of her country. Emperor Nero, who was betrayed by everyone, still sang loudly. Miss Drake, who was not bothered by trifles and was not bothered by the secular world. Miss Drake, who had a unique power that surpassed ordinary servants. I was really happy to be with her. Mordred, Fran, and Anderson. It was because of everyone's hard work that we finally saved the singularity. After that, Gadotsi stood up and walked in front of Edison. Hint: Wu-Ming has already left Edison while Gadotsi was talking. Gadotsi held Edison's furry hand and said firmly, "Please cooperate with us, Mr. Edison." Edison looked at Matthew's smiling face, Wu-Ming's hateful face because of the Celtic forces, Helena's encouraging face for her friend, and Karna, who finally nodded. Edison nodded heavily. Oh, Chaldea's master. From today on we are partners. Oh. Seeing Edison posing like a Chinibu again, the people present did not feel awkward anymore. Instead, their faces were filled with joy, and the joy of having a new partner increased. Chapter 499. After officially deciding to work together to fight against the other forces, Edison roared, Oh, I'm going to implement a 26-hour-a-day work system now, and left. He probably went to continue building mechanical infantry. After all, Edison's only purpose was to build mechanical infantry. Karna, on the other hand, greeted Gadotsi, the master, leader, and left San Francisco to continue guarding Boise. After all, Wu-Ming said that Denver might be the king of ghosts, Shitendaji, so he still had to go and guard it. In the end, only Helena, who was already sitting with Gadotsi and Matthew, was left at the scene. Wu-Ming could only smile bitterly. Should he say, as expected of women? They actually got along so well with each other so easily. Little Li Xiang, it's all thanks to you guys for coming. Helena sat beside Gadotsi and held her hand as she spoke. Why do you say that? Gadotsi expressed that she didn't understand at all. However, Wu-Ming was already sure of one thing. Even if Helena and Karna did set up Edison, it was out of good intentions. Therefore, Helena and Edison allowed Wu-Ming to do whatever he wanted. Tiske, the lion head is so pitiful. While Wu-Ming was sighing, Helena told him the reason. Actually, the reason why Edison became like this is because he received blessings from the past presidents of the United States. Helena's expression became a little sad. Thinking about it, it made sense. How could a human become a lion head? Actually, Edison wasn't like that, but those were the past presidents. After receiving their blessings, not only did Edison's appearance change, even his personality changed. He was willing to do anything for the United States, and he became abnormally egoistic. However, as soon as she finished speaking, Helena became happy. It could be said that it was because of your arrival that Edison was stimulated. Now his personality has changed. Helena looked at Wu-Ming gratefully as she spoke. After all, if it wasn't for Wu-Ming's series of shameless, series of shocking actions, Edison might not have been able to completely change back. In that case, he could only rely on beating to make Edison return to normal. Wu-Ming nodded, indicating that it was nothing. However, this gentleman's hooligan-like actions really gave me a fright. Helena couldn't stop laughing even though she said that she was scared. Wu-Ming waved his hand nonchalantly, but Gadotsi and Matthew felt awkward. I didn't think that assassin would do something like that. Although the outcome was pretty good, Gadotsi laughed out loud. Matthew, on the other hand, blushed and didn't say anything. Is this Mr. an assassin? I couldn't tell. Helena was a little surprised because of how Gadotsi addressed Wu-Ming. After all, Wu-Ming had the temperament of a king and the aura of light like the sun. It was really hard to tell that he was an assassin. I'm indeed not an assassin. Tachika just called me that out of habit. I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm really sorry, Madam Helena, you can just call me Celander. Wu-Ming said as he bowed to Helena in an ancient Celtic salute. You're really a Celtic, eh? I thought you were joking just now. As a lady who had studied magic all her life, Helena naturally knew about Celander, the warrior in the Celtic myth, the long march to capture the bull. So you're a lancer. When talking about the Celtic warrior Celander, one would definitely think of his holy spear, Yggdrasil, that was comparable to or even stronger than the magic spear Jayberg. However, Wu-Ming shook his head in response to Helena's guess. I'm sorry. Because Maeve used the Holy Grail to distort me, I descended as a berserker this time. Berserker? Whether it was Helena, Matthew, or Gadotsi, they all exclaimed in surprise. Helena was surprised that Wu-Ming descended as a berserker, but he was full of knowledge and wisdom. She wasn't surprised that Wu-Ming was a berserker. After all, Celtic followers basically had crazy behaviors, and they had the qualifications to become a berserker. Gadotsi and Matthew really didn't expect Wu-Ming to be a berserker. Although Wu Ming didn't say anything when he was in Riverton, looking at Wu Ming's appearance, it didn't seem like he was related to a berserker. I thought Senior Celander was a lancer or a ruler, Matthew, who was sitting on the other side of Gadotsi, said softly. Gadotsi stared at Wu Ming and nodded. On one hand she agreed with Matthew's words, and on the other hand she was blaming Wu Ming for hiding it from her. After all, you didn't ask me. Wu Ming instantly threw away the blame. Then Gadotsi's little face became angry, and she looked at Wu Ming with dissatisfaction. Wu Ming smiled bitterly, then walked behind Gadotsi and stroked Gadotsi's little head as if he was petting a cat. Only then did Gadotsi's face regain a smile. You two are really close, Helena said with a smile as she looked at Wu Ming and Gadotsi, who were like a pair of siblings. Indeed, Matthew also looked at the interaction between Wu Ming and Gadotsi with slight envy. However, he didn't know whether he was envious of Wu Ming, who could be so intimate with Gadotsi, or envious of Gadotsi, who could enjoy Wu Ming's touch. Then Matthew's cheeks turned red, and he quickly shook his head as if he was trying to get rid of the impure thoughts in his heart. Are you close? I don't think so. I think it's a normal relationship. Helena smiled helplessly as she looked at Gadotsi rubbing Wu Ming's hand unconsciously again. She decided not to talk about it anymore. Did you know that the Superman potion that Mr. Celander destroyed just now could have instantly increased Edison's strength to the level of a first-class servant? Helena said as she looked at the broken test tube on the ground that had lost all traces of the potion. However, it was just a pity. She was more than happy. However, if Edison really used it, it wouldn't take long for his spiritual base to collapse. It's not something that ordinary people can use. Even if Karna used it, the aftereffects would be very serious. Gadotsi's and Matthew's worried faces disappeared after Helena said that. They originally thought that Wu Ming's shameless behavior had destroyed Edison's trump card. However, since it was a trump card with super strong aftereffects, and Edison didn't say anything about it afterward, Gadotsi and Matthew didn't have to worry about it. Indeed, Edison's Superman potion has super strong aftereffects. However, since it's a miracle potion from Edison, the king of invention, I think it still has some effect. Wu Ming took out a colorful potion from the golden ripples. It was Edison's Superman potion. Huh? Chapter 500. What's going on? I really did see you destroy the Superman potion. Helena looked at the remains of the test tubes on the ground as she spoke. Actually, one of the reasons why Helena didn't say anything or do anything was to let Wu Ming destroy the Superman potion. After all, this thing was too dangerous for Edison. As Edison's best friend, Helena didn't want to see her old friend go astray. Then Wu Ming smiled. Test tubes can be created easily. With that, Wu Ming stretched out his hand, and a test tube that looked exactly like the Superman potion appeared in Wu Ming's hand. There was also the rainbow-colored Superman potion in it. After I got the Superman potion from Edison, I placed it in my relic space and created a replica in an instant to pass it off as the real thing. When Wu Ming took the Superman potion, there was a magical wave in his hand. It seemed like Wu Ming was afraid that the Superman potion wouldn't be damaged by a simple fall, but in fact, it was to fool others. After all, Wu Ming's Dragoness space could be big or small. He put the Superman potion in the Dragoness space with the help of the magical wave and created an identical test tube with the Create Green item. The rainbow-colored potion in the test tube was just the rainbow-colored water created by Wu Ming. It had no effect at all. Now, Wu Ming didn't even need to recite a spell to create such a small thing. It was a piece of cake for him. After all, from Edison's point of view, this Superman potion is also incomparably important. How can I casually destroy someone else's important trump card? It was also because of this that Wu Ming took the Superman potion and destroyed it so decisively. Wu Ming's move left Helena speechless. She could only shake her head with a bitter smile. Who would have thought that the test tube in front of her could be replaced in an instant? This is fate, I guess. However, I hope that you won't return this potion to Edison. I don't want my old friend to be in danger again. Helena smiled bitterly before pleading with Wu Ming. If that's the case, then I won't return it to him. With that, Wu Ming tossed the Superman potion into the air. Golden ripples appeared and swallowed the Superman potion. Wu Ming was a collector. Even if he did not use them, he would keep them in his relic as a souvenir. Then I'll thank you in advance. A childish smile appeared on Helena's face that did not match her actual age. It's getting dark. Tachika, why don't you stay here for the night? They started their journey early in the morning and left the Rocky Mountains a few hours later. They encountered Karna and fought him. Then Karna led them to this place. By then, the sky had already begun to darken. In addition, the negotiation had taken a lot of effort, so the sky had naturally darkened. Looking at the completely dark sky outside, Gadotsi naturally nodded. After eating the dinner that Wuming prepared in his relic space, Helena assigned the three of them a room. Wuming's relic space was really a utility room. There was everything, and the food ingredients would not spoil in the space. After all, there was magic power to maintain them. Therefore, using the create green item, Wuming casually created a kitchen and made a feast. Because of the aroma, Helena was attracted to eat with him. Even Helena in the 19th century was captivated by Wuming's food. Well, of course. After all, this was the food that could capture King Arthur's heart. Gadotsi was a human and naturally needed to eat. Although Mashu was a demi-servant, she still had the habit of eating. Naturally, Wuming was the same. He wouldn't stop eating just because he didn't need to eat unless there was no need to eat, just like when food was scarce he would choose not to eat. However, the three of them did not see Edison during this period. It seemed that Edison was really going to implement the so-called 26-hour-a-day. Originally, Gadotsi wanted to talk to Wuming about their future actions, but Wuming refused. Wuming pushed Gadotsi into the room with the excuse of resting when it's time to rest. At the same time, this also dispelled Roman's idea of talking to Wuming. He was very bored. Although Edison and Karna had left, Helena was still there. In order to prevent his sudden appearance from causing unnecessary hate, Roman had been listening by the side without saying a word. The night gradually deepened. Time passed. The next morning, Wuming knocked on Gadotsi's door again and took her out. Although Gadotsi had been protesting and condemning Wuming's behavior of not letting her sleep, Gadotsi still obediently put on her clothes. Really, does Tachika usually like to sleep in? Wuming complained and asked Matthew, who was sitting beside him at the table. The senior doesn't really sleep in. I think it's because Senior Celander is here that Senior can sleep in peace. In other words, because of Wuming's presence, Gadotsi subconsciously slept in every day out of trust. Now that I think about it, being with Tachika is really like taking care of a slightly naughty sister. Wuming sighed and looked at Tachika, who had finished dressing and trotted over. Wuming's eyes were full of love. She was just an ordinary little girl with master aptitude, but she shouldered the burden of saving the world. How could she not be spoiled? Hey! Gadotsi said a strange phrase, then sat on the other side of Wuming, opposite Matthew, and began to enjoy breakfast. It's a traditional Japanese breakfast. I didn't expect Assassin to know how to make it. Gadotsi was surprised. Matthew was also surprised, but because of his shyness and his senior's absence, he didn't say anything. You know, I'm not dead yet. This servant's body is just a temporary body. I still have a sister in another world. If I don't know how to cook, my sister will run away with someone else. Wuming smiled and made a little joke. However, this was unexpected news to Gadotsi and Matthew. Assassin, you actually have a sister? How old is she? What does she look like? Is she your brother? Gadotsi was like a paparazzi, began to dig out Wuming's background. Okay, let's eat first. It's getting cold. I'll tell you these things later. Although Wuming said that the food would get cold, how could the magic-enhanced food get cold? He could only use it to scare Gadotsi. Wuming said so, Gadotsi didn't ask anymore and began to enjoy the food. Edison hasn't come out of the lab yet, so he had no chance to eat this delicious breakfast, and Helena refused the breakfast on the grounds that a delicious meal is enough. After all, servants eat because of lack of magic, and Helena, as a caster, hasn't reached that point yet. Since she said so, Wuming didn't insist. Then Gadotsi began to shout because of the breakfast. Oh, this miso soup is really delicious. Matthew, come and try this pickled vegetable. Oh, this grilled snapper is so delicious. Saving people is worth it. Wuming listened to Gadotsi's sigh and could only smile helplessly. The reason for saving people is to eat breakfast. If Roman heard what you said, he would shut himself up for a while. However, when it comes to eating, being happy is the most important thing. If she can't even eat, then it's too heavy for this little girl. On the other side, Lionhead's lab. Sniffed, it seems that there's the smell of grilled fish. Is it because I'm too tired and hallucinating, M? Chapter 501. After breakfast, Wuming, Gadotsi, and Matthew went on their way. It just so happened that Edison was attracted out of the laboratory by a special fragrance and happened to meet Wuming and the others who were about to leave. Then Edison and Helena saw Wu-ming and the others off. Before leaving, Wu-ming gave Edison a communication device similar to a modern mobile phone. After all, Wu-ming didn't ask Edison, Helena, and Karna to follow them. In that case, they must have a communication device to ensure that they could contact each other at any time. This communication device was naturally made by Wu-ming using Create Green item. In other words, Wu-ming's ability could be regarded as a caster's level skill, item creation. In fact, this communication device was made by Wu-ming based on a mobile phone. Its only function was to connect and call another communication device. As for the signal needed by an ordinary mobile phone, Wu-ming used magic to replace it. As long as it was in this singularity, the two communication devices could contact each other. It was similar to the bracelet that Roman used to contact Gadotsi. After all, Wu-ming made it based on Gadotsi and Chaldea's communication bracelet. However, Gadotsi's communication bracelet had more functions than the communication device made by Wu-ming. Ray shift, virtual screen, establishment of material supply summoning circle, and other abilities were basically related to this communication bracelet. Although the inventor of the telephone has always been controversial, it was undeniable that Edison could indeed make a telephone. That was to say, if he wanted to, he could also fight a modern war. However, his enemy was something that modern war couldn't fight. Moreover, if he really did that, it would be as unreliable as building a hot spring hotel to serve ordinary people at the end of the world. Who would enjoy the comfort of a hot spring if they couldn't survive? As for Edison, if he had the time, he would definitely choose to make a few more mechanical infantry instead of choosing to build a communication device. However, he didn't have many subordinates. They were all mechanical infantry that only knew how to obey orders, so building a communication device was useless. In Wu-ming's opinion, it was better to install a monitor on the mechanical infantry. However, it was a bit extravagant to install a monitor on all the mechanical infantry. It was better to build a communication device. So far, Edison didn't do anything and just focused on building mechanical infantry. Therefore, Edison was quite interested in the gadgets that Wu-ming gave him. Be ready to attack at any time. After saying that, Wu-ming turned his gun into white deer and left with Gadotsi and Matthew. After making the white deer a little bigger again, Wu-ming stood on top of the white deer's head while Gadotsi and Matthew sat steadily on the white deer's back. With Wu-ming's stabilizing magic, there was no need to worry about Gadotsi and Matthew being thrown out. Of course, the same was true for Wu-ming. Without the mount skill, Wu-ming's control over the mount had decreased by more than one level. After all, the white deer under him was transformed from his gun and could not be regarded as a complete mount. Therefore, he also needed to use magic to stabilize his body. The white deer drove away from a small plain area in the west and entered the mountainous area. The white deer jumped up and down, but it still had no effect on Wu-ming and the other two on the white deer. Gadotsi and Matthew said a few words and then pulled Wu-ming down. After all, Wu-ming promised to tell Gadotsi the story of his sister. Wu-ming also shook his head helplessly, then he began to tell the story of his sister. Because of their trust and the fact that there was no need to hide anything, Wu-ming did not plan to hide anything. Everything he said was the truth. However, Wu-ming did not tell the story as a legend, but as Meiyo's brother. After all, it was a continuous experience. Wu-ming talked for a while before he left Meiyo's world and went to another parallel world. Wu-ming also stopped. After all, he had to let Matthew and Gadotsi digest it. I feel that the man named Amiya Kiritsugu is bad. He actually wants to raise Meiyu as a living tool. That Ainsworth is also not a good person. He actually wants to sacrifice a little girl to save the world. If he is really so strong, we can just think of other ways, Gadotsi said unhappily. Although this is the case from the perspective of human beings all over the world, Amiya Kiritsugu's ideal and Ainsworth's approach are both correct. Wu-ming did not deliberately refute Gadotsi but considered it from a more rational point of view. However, although Amiya Kiritsugu's worries were groundless, Ainsworth really did have the power to save the world. Although it was also considered an opportunist to be able to trick Wu-ming, he was also quite capable. Then, just as Gadotsi was about to refute, Wu-ming continued. However, let's not talk about whether they have the power to save the world first. Just the fact that they dare to touch my sister is absolutely not allowed. Wu-ming said rather domineeringly. However, in Gadotsi's eyes, this was a Siscon. I didn't expect you to have a Siscon assassin. Gadotsi snickered. This made Wu-ming feel rather helpless. It was not that he did not dare to admit it, but it was not a good word to say. At this time, Wu-ming and Gadotsi heard a series of trivial words. It's just that I didn't expect the Holy Grail War in the parallel world to be like this. The Holy Grail is a humanoid life form, and it changed from being a magician to using a class card. This voice was undoubtedly Roman's. There's no one else now, do you have to be so sneaky? Wu-Ming said to the bracelet on Gadatsi's wrist rather disdainfully. Sorry. Accompanied by Roman's apologetic voice, Roman's figure appeared along with the virtual screen. I was fascinated by your story just now and forgot to turn on the virtual screen for a moment. Although the magic consumption of the virtual screen was slightly higher, it was a little too much for Chaldea, who could not obtain external funding. However, because of Wu-Ming's generous funding, Chaldea would not lack magic even if the virtual screen was always turned on. Previously, when Wu-Ming went to Chaldea, although he did not give Roman a magic crystal or something like that, he gave him an automatic magic production device. This device was actually a defective product of the magic supply device in Blackie's body. The magic supply device in Blackie's body was transformed into an organ like a magic circuit, but this defective product could not be loaded into the human body. Although it was called a defective product, it was no different from the one in Blackie's body except that it could not be loaded into the human body. A device was enough to supply a servant with magic power. Wu-Ming did not give Roman a device, but dozens of devices, and Wu-Ming also increased the power, enough for Chaldea to squander. At this time Matthew spoke faintly. A humanoid Holy Grail. Matthew was quite concerned about Mayu as a humanoid Holy Grail. The humanoid Holy Grail and the androids cultivated for the servant experiment could be said to have similarities. Matthew found a resonance. And this resonance was not a good thing. As Matthew's attending physician, Roman knew very well that this was not good for Matthew. As if he also knew that he started the wrong topic, Roman naturally shut up. Gadatsi did not ask Wu-Ming to continue the story, but asked the next step. Assassin, what are we going to do next? Then Wu-Ming had a smile on his face. Of course, first get rid of the bystanders. Chapter 502. The three of them heard what Wu-Ming said not long ago and looked at Wu-Ming awkwardly. After all, when Wu-Ming said this sentence before, he was referring to the American forces. But Gadatsi and the others didn't think that Wu-Ming would backhand an ally that had just formed an alliance. Of course, I'm not talking about Edison. Wu-Ming shook his head with a smile. I'm talking about there. Wu-Ming said as he pointed to the Rocky Mountains. You mean, the Japanese Holy Grail forces? Roman said thoughtfully. Of course, now the Celtic forces in the easternmost part of the continent and the American forces in the westernmost part of the continent are on the same side. The Celtic forces have Maeve. Let's not talk about offense, but defense is more than enough. After all, in addition to Maeve, who was not weak, there was also Finn, Dilmond, and the Indian servant that he had never met. However, according to Maeve, she had some relationship with Rama. Since she had some relationship with Rama, she was certainly not weak, so he didn't need to worry too much about the Celtic forces for the time being. In addition to that, there was also the location of Riverton, the base of the servants that were currently alone. Riverton is located in the Missouri River Basin. It's not that far from Denver. Currently we're in an alliance with Edison, but there's another force in the middle. The situation isn't good, so I think we should get rid of the Japanese force that's obstructing Riverton and San Francisco's Denver. Gadatsi, Matthew, and Roman heard Wu-Ming's explanation and also felt that Wu-Ming was right, and they all nodded. However, in fact, Wu-Ming had other reasons. If there was no accident, the one in Denver was Shitendaji. That Ghost King really wanted to see the world in chaos. Last time, even if he died, he still wanted to annoy Wu-Ming. Although Shitendaji's poison was not so fatal to Wu-Ming, it was not the same for other servants. Especially Gadatsi, it was Shitendaji's poison. If it eroded Gadatsi, then the last master of Chaldea would be dead. Not only that, Shitendaji's poison would continue to spread. Although he didn't know if there was an end to it, but if the entire American continent was poisoned, it would be quite a headache for Wu-Ming. So this time, Wu-Ming didn't dare to leave her until the end. If she caused trouble again, it would be really bad. But even if it wasn't for Shitendaji, Wu-Ming would still choose Denver as the first force. The reason was that this force occupied the Rocky Mountains, blocking the route between Riverton and San Francisco. While Greece and Rome were still fighting each other, they would take down this Holy Grail force in one fell swoop, and then join forces with Edison in the west and Maeve in the east to attack Greece and Rome. This was Wu-Ming's plan. Then when are we going to attack Japan? Gadatsi asked the key question. Wu-Ming's lips curled up as if he was deliberately waiting for this question. Then Wu-Ming's face was full of a bright smile. There's no time like the present. When we pass by the Rocky Mountains, we'll attack directly. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then shocked voices echoed throughout the world. Hey hey hey. Then, among the voices that resounded through the sky, there was also a voice that sounded like a joke. Just kidding. A moment later, Boise. Wu Ming accelerated the speed of the white deer again, and according to the level, it had reached Class A. In this way, Wu Ming took Gadotsi and Matthew to Boise before noon, where they were supposed to arrive after noon. Inside the Boise fortress, in a shabby house, Karna was sitting opposite Gadotsi, as if he had just realized something. So that's how it is, Fujimaru-san wants to take down Denver City directly. Then Gadotsi, who was sitting opposite Karna, looked rather helpless. That's not what I want, Gadotsi said with lingering fear. Just now Wu Ming really scared her. With only 2 servants, he wanted to take down a city with an unknown number of enemies. To be honest, Gadotsi really didn't dare. Matthew sat next to Gadotsi and smiled awkwardly. To be honest, she also didn't dare. Then, as if he didn't hear Gadotsi's words, Karna nodded knowingly. I understand. I will help you take down Denver City together. Although there was some resistance, Gadotsi and others decided to listen to Wu Ming and attack Denver City directly. Therefore, after hearing Karna's approval, their mood improved. Then Gadotsi and Matthew felt a burst of joy in their hearts. Sure enough, Assassin was right. As long as we come to Karna, he will definitely help us. That's right, it was actually Wu Ming who proposed to come to Karna. First, it was to comfort Gadotsi and others who were frightened. Second, it was because Karna was powerful. Third, it was because the Rocky Mountains were close to Boise. Even Karna didn't want to have enemies next to him all the time. As mentioned before, the reason why Karna was stationed in Boise was to defend against the attack of Japanese forces. At this moment, the American forces could no longer withstand the attack of the enemy. Just like what Wu Ming said, as long as someone held Karna back, there were only 2 servants left, and they were Edison and Helena, who were caster class. In the face of the mysterious Japanese ghost clan, even if they risked their lives to destroy the Japanese forces, they would still be defeated. Therefore, Karna was personally stationed in Boise. In fact, if it weren't for the arrival of Wu Ming and others, Karna would have been wandering in the central plain basin of the Cordillera Mountains, checking the enemy's movements. Great, with the help of the famous hero Karna, this is really foolproof. On the left side of Gadotsi and Matthew, Roman's virtual screen appeared there. Karna, on the other hand, glanced at Roman and didn't say anything. Seeing that there was finally a servant who didn't attack him, Roman was a little touched. It seems that when Karna doesn't talk to others, it means that Karna hates you, poor Roman. Wu Ming, who was sitting on the right side of Gadotsi, looked at Roman's face and felt that it was better not to tell him the truth. In fact, Roman's virtual screen was there from the beginning, but Karna didn't know why he subconsciously ignored it. If the enemy is really Shitendaji, my flame can play a big role. The sun's flame could burn everything, so it was more than enough to deal with Shitendaji's poison. Wu Ming nodded and agreed with Karna's words. In fact, this was one of the reasons why Wu Ming looked for Karna. In that case, let's go back to Riverton first, and then I will release my noble phantasm. You pay more attention to Karna, use my noble phantasm as the signal, and we will attack Denver together. Wu Ming's intention was simple. First, they had to find Karna, then Wu Ming and the other 2 would return to Riverton and gather people to attack Denver. With Wu Ming and Karna around, the poison around Denver would not be a problem. After all, other than Karna's flame, Wu Ming could also use the trinkets in his noble phantasm. No problem, as long as I sense your noble phantasm, I will definitely come, Karna said solemnly. In that case, let's not waste any more time. We'll go first. After a simple farewell, Gadotsi waved goodbye to Karna. Needless to say, Gadotsi was quite lively. Although Karna only nodded at Gadotsi's farewell, it was enough to see that Karna had a good impression of Gadotsi. I feel like I'm being hated again. As Roman complained helplessly and Gadotsi and Matthew comforted him, Wu Ming and the other 2 set off again. Then Wu Ming's enemy's noble phantasm rode on his face. Tenki aim. Chapter 503. Tenki aim. Hundreds of Japanese samurai swords rained down on White Deer, where Wu Ming and the other 2 were, and they launched a large-scale attack. This move reminded Wu Ming of Gilgamesh. Then, the place where the White Deer was attacked by hundreds of samurai swords exploded. Boom! The explosion was extremely violent. It seemed that the samurai swords came with the intention to kill. As far as they were concerned, the plain terrain on the plateau had become a basin. The smoke and dust caused by the explosion continued to fill the air. After the explosion, hundreds of samurai swords automatically flew back to the place where they came from, a high ground in the Rocky Mountains. Hundreds of samurai swords merged into one and fell into the hands of a fox-eared girl wearing a JK uniform. She wore the JK female high school uniform with white top and red bottom. She wore a red unlined gown, red stockings, and high leather shoes that looked like wooden clogs and leather shoes. She also wore a black hat on her pale orange hair. There were 2 shining scabbards on her body. One was a scabbard with silver light. The samurai sword was still in the scabbard, and the other scabbard exuded a golden light. There was no doubt that it was the scabbard of the golden samurai sword in her hand. The most conspicuous thing was the pale orange fox ears on the girl's head and the pale orange fox tail behind her, which made people think of a monster. However, she was not a monster. If Wuming was there, he would be able to see that she was a servant. It was very likely that she was a saber. After all, she was holding a samurai sword. Mission completed, I'm done. The fox-eared girl blinked her orange eyes, put the golden samurai sword in her hand into the scabbard, and was ready to leave. Then she was also attacked by her enemy's noble phantasm, mythical Yggdrasil. In an instant, a huge holy light spear burst out from the basin full of smoke that had not yet dissipated. The light spear dispelled most of the smoke. The fox-eared girl also saw the target of her mission. There was a white figure in the place that was destroyed into a basin. That was undoubtedly the person who released the light spear. The white deer's figure still disappeared. Wuming maintained the position of throwing the spear. The holy silver armor on his body exuded light, and the helmet that he no longer wore was once again put on. Behind Wuming, on a piece of land that had not been destroyed, stood Gadatsi and Matthew, who was holding a shield. There was a faint blue magical power on the shield. There was no doubt that this piece of land and Gadatsi were protected by Matthew's noble phantasm. Since Wuming had a defensive noble phantasm, naturally he did not need Matthew's protection. I can't believe you found my location. Although her tone was slightly shocked, the fox-eared girl still had a smile on her face. You are indeed a servant that the Spirit King takes care of. The fox-eared girl's body did not stop moving, and she quickly dodged backward. She was not a person like Wuming. If she was really hit by such a military noble phantasm, she would most likely be killed. Even if she did not die, she would lose a layer of skin. Rumble, the light spear hit the fox-eared girl's position. As the fox-eared girl's location was in a mountainous area, the mountaintop was completely destroyed by Wuming's noble phantasm. Countless stones rolled down, forming a scene like a landslide. Just when Matthew wanted to use his noble phantasm to block her, Wuming, who was below Matthew, waved his hand, indicating that Matthew did not need to use his noble phantasm. He took this opportunity to stop her. At the same time, the white light spear fell from the mountaintop, and Wuming firmly held it in his hand. Mythical Yggdrasil, legend of the Holy King. Releasing his noble phantasm again, Wuming gently threw out the spear that was emitting light in his hand. However, the noble phantasm that was thrown out this time did not turn into a huge light spear, but countless small light arrows that were arranged in a row. The principle of mythical Yggdrasil's noble phantasm was to control the light to give a huge blow to the enemy. Wuming's holy spear Yggdrasil had been left behind in Uruk. Therefore, Wuming's weapon in this singularity was just a simulated artifact. Therefore, it did not have a fixed form, so naturally it could be used. Then, countless arrows of light hit the countless scattered mountain rocks. As if there was a chemical reaction, the rocks melted and dissipated into the air. It was dissolved by a high-heat substance called light. It was just a stone, so it was as easy as flipping one's hand to dissolve it with a noble relic. Then, the light arrows merged and turned into a holy spear that returned to Wuming's hand. Wuming looked deeply at the mountaintop that was missing a piece and frowned secretly. It doesn't look like it was hit. The fox-eared girl should not have left yet. Although the fox-eared girl was not close to Wuming, Wuming still saw a shadow of the enemy servant through the Lune Rune. It was a fox-eared girl. Although Wuming was too far away, Wuming could not sense whether the fox-eared girl had left or not. His sixth sense told him that the person who launched the sneak attack was indeed not dead. He had to say that the opponent had a good plan. Because the distance was too far, Wuming could not sense the enemy servant around him. As long as there were servants, once they were close to each other, they would be able to sense each other. For Wuming, who had a strong mental strength, as long as the servant was not an assassin, it was basically impossible to rely on sneak attacks to get close to him. However, in this way Wu-Ming could not prepare in advance. Just like the fox-eared girl, releasing a noble phantasm from a long distance. Although the control precision of the noble phantasm would be reduced if it was too far away, it could directly hit the target through prediction and other various factors. It was like a sniper sniping the enemy from a long distance. There were many factors involved in successfully hitting the target, so ordinary people could not be snipers. From this, it could be seen that the fox-eared girl was quite intelligent. However, after Matthew defended the attack and protected Gidatsi, Wu-Ming also found the enemy's position through reverse inference. Before the smoke dissipated, Wu-Ming threw a noble phantasm. Wu-Ming's strong vision also allowed him to see the enemy when the noble phantasm broke through the smoke. It was the fox-eared girl. Although the noble phantasm also hit the fox-eared girl's position, Wu-Ming did not think that the fox-eared girl would not consider the unexpected situation of being attacked by the enemy's noble phantasm. But it doesn't matter. I have no reason to attack them. Now I have a reason. Wu-Ming whispered to himself. Behind Wu-Ming, Matthew quickly checked on Gidatsi's condition. "Senpai, are you okay?" Matthew was slightly excited and shouted. "I'm fine. Thanks to Matthew's protection, I'm not hurt at all." Gidatsi showed Matthew a big smile and then hugged Matthew, which made Matthew's face blush. "What's wrong? What's wrong? What happened?" Suddenly, Roman's figure appeared in front of them along with his words. A virtual screen appeared. What's going on? Roman seemed to be panicking. Due to the diffusion of the fox-eared girl's noble phantasm, the surrounding ground only sank by 1 or 2 meters. However, the place where Matthew and Gidatsi were standing was not hurt. As a result, Matthew and Gidatsi were standing on a 2-meter-high platform made of mud. Wu-Ming was below the platform. He did not enter Matthew's protection at all. He completely resisted the attack and then released his noble phantasm to defeat the enemy. We were attacked by the Japanese forces. Chapter 504. After hearing Wu-Ming's words, Roman was shocked. Hey. What the hell is going on here? Did anything happen to Li Xiang? The attack just now actually cut off the communication between the two sides. It really gave me a fright. Roman said in a slightly panicked manner like an ordinary person. Because the Magic King sent a few holy grails to this singularity, or maybe this singularity was affected by the Magic King, the magic content in the singularity has increased a lot. Although the connection between Gidatsi and Chaldea was not completely blocked, if there was any magical fluctuation, it was easy to cut off the connection. In the sudden attack just now, the connection between Gidatsi and Chaldea was cut off. It was a good example. It's okay, Doctor, Matthew protected me very well and the enemy was also killed by assassin. After going through so much, Gidatsi's heart became optimistic, and she did not panic because of the sudden attack. Phew. It's good that nothing happened. Roman's heart was finally at ease. Although I don't want to discourage you, unfortunately the enemy servant was not killed by me, she escaped. Wu-Ming jumped on the small platform where Gidatsi and Matthew were, and his helmet touched again, revealing his dignified face. She was not killed by you, but thinking about it, the enemy is also a servant, she should have a way to save her life. Roman touched the back of his head and smiled, but unfortunately, Gidatsi and the others did not pay attention to him. Her? That means the enemy servant is a female. Gidatsi noticed Wu-Ming's words. Indeed, the moment I used my noble phantasm to hit the enemy, I saw the enemy's face. It was a girl in red with fox ears and a fox tail, and the enemy was using a golden katana, so it seems that the enemy has some connection with the Japanese forces. In the territory of the Japanese forces, a black hat, fox ears, fox tail, a golden katana, and ancient clothing, all signs pointed to the fact that the enemy was a servant of the Japanese forces. A servant with Japanese attributes wearing a tsurugi hat, I'm afraid that's the only one. Roman played his role as a support member very well. Hey, Doctor, do you know who the enemy is? Matthew asked curiously. I know, after all, I can't be an effective support here, so I read a lot of books about history and mythology. He touched the back of his head as if he was embarrassed. Don't say that, Roman. You have to know that information is also very important. Wu-Ming shook his head at Roman. Wu-Ming knew the story of Maeve, King Arthur, and Gilgamesh, so he could participate in those places when he first came. If Wu-Ming didn't know anything, he would definitely be in the dark. Gidatsi also nodded. She didn't think that the doctor had no role in Chaldea. So, Doctor, who is the enemy? After Gadazzi asked the question, Roman nodded and began to explain. The black hat is a kind of black top hat handed down from the Heian period of Japan. There are many kinds of black hats, and the standing black hat is one of them, but generally the standing black hat is worn by men, and the most famous woman who wears the standing black hat is Suzaku Guzan. Suzaku Guzan? Wuming was puzzled. He really didn't know this name. There are many rumors about Suzaku Guzan's identity, such as female thief, female ghost, angel, goddess, etc. However, so far most people agree that she is the daughter of the demon king of the fourth heaven. She is the angel who was ordered to descend to earth during the Heian period. She didn't want to turn Japan into a demonic country, so she fell in love with Sakunu Tamura when they were killing ghosts together. In the end, she was killed by her lover. Roman briefly introduced the fox-eared girl, Suzaku Guzan. But now, it seems like she is a female bandit who occupies a mountain and calls herself king. Roman smiled helplessly. According to Selander, the enemy's noble phantasm is countless golden katanas that fall like rain. That should be one of the three swords of Suzaku Guzan, the Manjushri, the Sword of Wisdom, and the Sword of Harmony. As Roman spoke, Wuming also recalled the other katana that was emitting a silver glow. If that's the case, the katana that is emitting a silver glow is one of the other two swords, right? Roman nodded. That silver sword should be the sister sword of the Sword of Harmony. It is the Samantabhadra Merciful Sword. However, there are also rumors that the Sword of Wisdom is the same as the Sword of Wisdom. Wuming thought of a guess. Since the Sword of Harmony was used to attack, the enemy must have used the Sword of Harmony for some other purpose, such as increasing the precision of control. This could also explain how the enemy could attack Wuming, who was at the foot of the mountain from such a distance. However, this was just a guess. In short, the enemy would not take it. However, Wuming had the advantage. If the enemy is an angel, she should have divinity. Roman thought for a moment and nodded. After all, every rumor is related to the angel. The probability of the enemy having divinity is very high. Then Wuming smiled. Since she has divinity, I have a way to deal with her. After all, Wuming's Dragoness space had a lot of pseudo-heavenly locks. At the beginning, because he knew the magic of heavenly locks, Wuming deliberately made high-quality pseudo-heavenly locks. Even if they were not used, they would not disappear. After using them, as long as they were injected with magic, these pseudo-heavenly locks would be renewed. Wuming prepared those pseudo-heavenly locks to deal with the followers with divinity. Since the enemy has already made a move against us, I'm afraid the road back to Riverton will not be easy, so... Wuming paused for a moment, which made Gadazzi, Matthew, and Roman puzzled. So let's go straight in. Wuming smiled at Gadazzi and the others. Ah, screams resounded through the world. Good Lord, after going around in circles, they still ended up attacking the enemy's base. Boise. Karna saw that a mountain in the Rocky Mountains had been blown up. When he took a closer look, he saw pure white and holy magic. There was no doubt that it was Wuming's noble phantasm. Is it that fast? I thought it would take a few hours to start. Although Karna's tone was doubtful, he did not stop moving. He held his golden spear, gave orders to the mechanical infantry in Boise City, and ran towards the location where Wuming released his noble phantasm. In any case, it was agreed that Karna would support them under the command of Wuming's noble phantasm. Hence, Karna left immediately. On the other side, Denver City. In a dark hall, behind a curtain without any means of lighting, a figure kept pouring wine and drinking wine. How did she know that it was wine? The fox-eared girl, or rather Ling Lu Guzan, had already smelled a lot of wine when she walked to the door. It's really good wine. Ling Lu Guzan thought to herself. Although she did not drink much, as a female thief who once occupied a mountain, she said that she would drink as long as she was told that it was good wine. However, she did not dare to drink the wine that the figure in front of her was drinking. It was poisonous wine. What if she drank it to death? Ling Lu Guzan walked into the hall and said without a care. I failed Shitendaji. Chapter 505. She didn't hesitate to call out the name of the figure behind the curtain. Her tone didn't have the slightest bit of respect. The other party was only able to make them submit temporarily because of the Holy Grail. They could still listen to normal orders, but if they encountered any orders that went against their will, they would naturally go back and fight back. Ah, I knew it would be like this. Shitendaji poured himself another bowl of wine and drank it slowly. On the other hand, Ling Lu Yuqian frowned slightly. She did not want to smell this kind of alcohol. It was like a slow-acting poison. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I was almost killed by a noble phantasm just now. If it weren't for Xiao Tonglien's support, I wouldn't be able to survive the sudden attack. With the help of the Silver Wisdom Sword, Ling Lu was able to come up with a plan to retreat. She had also planned for the enemy to launch an attack on her relic. Go ahead, but I think the other party will come to us soon. Don't lose your life, Shitendaji laughed mischievously. There's no need for you to worry. With that, Ling Lu Imperial Qian left the hall. So it's you. No wonder you're the second person who cut off my head. You're extraordinary. Shitendaji poured the wine into his bowl, but this time he didn't drink it. But it's fate that we're able to meet again. Shitendaji poured the wine on the ground. The carpet on the ground wasn't soaked by the wine. Instead, it seemed to have blended into the air, creating a different feeling. I'm looking forward to it. On the other side, Wuming was close to Denver City. After killing all the ghosts and spirits, he looked at the approaching Denver City. As I expected, it's been a tough journey. Although that was what he said, Gadatsi and Matthew looked uncomfortable. I feel like if we don't cause trouble for them, they won't send ghosts to attack us. Senpai, I feel the same way. The ghosts we met along the way were all on the way to Denver City. We should return to Riverton first. Matthew and Gadatsi whispered to each other. You're too naive, Junior Matthew. It looks like the enemy is only ambushing us on the way to Denver, but in reality if we continue to head towards Riverton, they will free up their forces to deal with us. This is an open trap, remember that. Wuming said with an expression that said, you're still too inexperienced. Yes, Senior Cylinder. Matthew will remember that. As a result, Mashu replied in high spirits. Although Cylinder is right, why do I feel that this reason is a little far-fetched? Roman's voice came from Gadatsi's wrist. Well, Assassin, don't give Matthew the wrong idea. Even Gadatsi felt that Assassin was a little unreliable. Sigh. Matthew looked confused. In any case, we're already here. I'm afraid the enemy won't let us go back so easily. Wuming did not deny that his statement was wrong. Looking at the ghosts that kept pouring out of Denver City, Wuming did not think that he could just leave after provoking the enemy. If only it was that easy. Besides, Karna should be here soon. Let's take down Denver in one go. At this point, whether it was Gadatsi, Matthew, or Roman, no one could refute Wuming. Phew. That's the only way. Roman sighed and said helplessly. In this situation, retreating would make it easier for the enemy to sneak up on them from behind. I have to say, you guys still underestimate the power of a top-tier servant. Wuming smiled faintly, attracting the attention of Gadatsi and the others. A top-tier servant is similar to a champion. What's more, the spiritual base of this body is strengthened by the Holy Grail in my own body. It can be said that Matthew and I alone are enough to take down Denver City. Of course, that's only if the other party's servants are known to us. After all, as long as it was a servant, they should not be underestimated. Every servant had a noble phantasm, and the noble phantasm was the key to victory from defeat. As long as it's not an exceptional servant, then the only thing we need to pay attention to in Denver City is Shitendaji. Roman also looked serious after hearing Wuming's words. Cylinder is right, Tachika. Although your body has a slight resistance to poison, this time you are facing Shitendaji's divine wine. It's better to be safe than sorry. 4 ordinary people, just smelling Shitendaji's poisonous wine will kill them directly. Roman said so much to be on the safe side. Tachika and Matthew should stay here. Wuming said. It's too dangerous to let Assassin go alone. Gadatsi was obviously not at ease. After all, it was Gadatsi's kindness. Wuming couldn't refuse again, so he smiled and promised again. Didn't I say that I'm a top-tier servant, and even if there is an emergency, I still know how to run, so don't worry. With that said, Wuming touched Gadatsi's little head, like a brother making a promise to his sister. Just when Gadatsi didn't say anything, a huge red flaming ghost hand attacked Wuming. Rashomon Daenji. Wuming's face froze and he immediately put on his helmet, then rushed toward the huge ghost hand with the holy lance in his hand. Mythical Yggdrasil. Once again Wuming activated his noble phantasm, and the light lance in his hand became huge. However, Wuming didn't throw it away. If it exploded here, Gadatsi and Matthew would still be affected. Therefore, Wuming directly held the huge light lance and faced the red flaming ghost hand. Rumble. Wuming pushed the ghost hand all the way to a distance of 100 meters away from Gadatsi and threw the light lance in his hand. By the way, the huge flaming ghost hand that was blocked by the light lance was also thrown directly, and there was a huge explosion in front of Denver City. Wuming stretched out his hand, and the holy lance returned to Wuming's hand. "It's you, Ibaraki Kido?" Wuming asked. After all, there were too many hints. It was related to Shitendaji, ghosts, Japanese monsters, Rashomon, plus he had met Ibaraki Kido in Uruk before. Wuming also remembered her voice, so when Ibaraki Kido shouted the name of the noble phantasm, Wuming had already guessed it. After Wuming asked, a female ghost dressed in yellow clothes with 2 horns on her forehead jumped out from an unknown place. Her entire body was covered in flames and she had 2 horns on her forehead. "I, Ibaraki Kido, will protect Shitendaji's Devil's Kingdom. Don't even think about breaking my home and Shitendaji's." Ibaraki Kido didn't seem to know Wuming at all. It seemed that this Ibaraki Kido had no connection with the Uruk's defector, but that was normal. How could he meet a servant with the memory of him and Wuming? Wuming was not lucky, so how could it be so easy to hit the jackpot? "I didn't deal with you in Uruk with the thought of less trouble. It seems that I have a chance today." After that, without waiting for Ibaraki Kido's reply, he directly went up and communicated with the other party with the Holy Lance. "Wah! You bastard, you haven't started yet." Chapter 506. Awe. Facing the White Knight who sneak attacked him, thought he was, Ibaraki Dojo roared like a ghost who had been provoked. At the same time, a gust of wind blew around Ibaraki Dojo. The wind helped the fire, and the hot flame rose to the sky, rushing toward Wuming who was attacking Ibaraki Dojo. Puchi. Wu Ming condensed his magic power into the holy spear in his hand and swept it across, dispersing the fire of karma. Then appeared in front of Wuming's eyes was a bone sword full of strange aura. Clang. Using the holy spear to block the bone sword's slash, it made a harsh collision sound. Wuming slammed hard, trying to push Ibaraki Dojo who was holding the bone sword out, but found that he couldn't push him out. Ibaraki Dojo's whole body exuded magical power, and the bone sword in his hand was also attached with demon aura. Hey. Wanna fight with a ghost? You're too naive." Ibaraki Dojo seemed to have found Wuming's mistake, and his face kept smiling as if he was mocking and proud. Zzz. Dash, Wuming held the holy spear with both hands and Ibaraki Dojo who was holding the bone sword with both hands kept exerting force. The holy spear and the bone sword rubbed against each other, making a harsh sound. Wuming really couldn't push Ibaraki Dojo away, but Wuming knew that although Ibaraki Dojo was a ghost, his strength as a servant didn't surpass Wuming. This point was discovered by Wuming when they fought, so it was reasonable to say that such a situation shouldn't happen. However, the other party seemed to have used an ability similar to the release of magic to strengthen his power. Ibaraki Kido's demonic aura was the best proof of this. However, Ibaraki Dojo wasn't the only one with skills. Wuming also had magical power. Boom. Wuming frowned, and a strong magical power burst out from the back of the armor below the shoulder, like a cloak, floating behind Wuming and like a comet tail, providing Wuming with strength. As a result, Wuming gradually suppressed Ibaraki Dojo. What? Ibaraki Dojo was shocked. She did know that the White Knight in front of her had the strength to suppress her, but she didn't expect that she still couldn't suppress the opponent with the help of Ghost Seed Demon. Is this guy Berserker? How is he stronger than a ghost? Ibaraki Dojo complained loudly in annoyance. When she saw the White Knight in front of her holding a gun, she thought that her enemy was a gunman. Who would have thought that the other party was so strong? What a coincidence, I'm Berserker. Wuming was quite impressed with Ibaraki Kido. In this kind of situation he still had the ability to chat with Wuming. Naturally, Wuming couldn't let him down. Damn it. Don't underestimate me. Ibaraki Dojo roared and then swung her right hand down. That's right, maybe because the connection of the right hand was unstable, Ibaraki Dojo had been using her left hand to hold the sword. Ibaraki Dojo used her right arm to hold the bone sword, and her entire right hand fell down. As if she could control it, Ibaraki Dojo's right hand flew around Ibaraki Dojo. Was it Ibaraki Dojo's demonic hand that was cut off? Wuming Dojo's eyes narrowed and Ibaraki Dojo finally had some free time. You didn't expect it, right? Since my right hand was cut off, although I took it back, it still couldn't connect with my right arm. Instead, it became my noble phantasm. Ibaraki Dojo looked at Wuming Dojo in front of her proudly. Take this. Rashomon Daenji. The demonic hand that was floating around Ibaraki Dojo turned into a huge flaming demonic hand as Ibaraki Dojo's noble phantasm was released. Wu-Ming felt a sense of danger from the demonic hand that was wrapped around the demonic hand. It was as if his noble armor was nothing and could hurt him at any time. However, even without the armor, Wu-Ming Dojo wasn't weak. Therefore, he didn't do anything else and continued to suppress Ibaraki Dojo. Then, when the huge demonic hand grabbed Wu-Ming, Wu-Ming shouted calmly, "Karna!" Ibaraki Dojo looked at Wu-Ming Dojo in confusion, not understanding what he meant. "Brahmastra, Brahma, cover the earth." A laser-like golden heat ray shot from afar and hit Ibaraki Dojo from below Wu-Ming Dojo's arm. A dash. Ibaraki Dojo spat out a mouthful of blood from his mouth. The blood that spilled on the ground was filled with heat and started to burn. Bang dash. Wu-Ming Dojo's magical power surged as he slapped Ibaraki Dojo away. Damn it, this is the breath of the sun. Ibaraki Dojo felt the scorching breath that was still in his body and spoke with difficulty. This scorching heat continued to burn Ibaraki Boy's body, making him suffer unspeakably. Just when Wu-Ming Dojo was about to kill Ibaraki Dojo, a piece of talisman paper flew between Ibaraki Dojo and Wu-Ming Dojo. Boom dash, the talisman paper turned into a flame that soared into the sky. However, from Wu-Ming Dojo's point of view, it was just a flame barrier. Its purpose was naturally to buy time for Ibaraki Dojo, who was behind the flame barrier. Wu-Ming Dojo swept out with his holy lance that contained powerful magical power, and the flame barrier was instantly broken. Where Ibaraki Dojo was originally, there was only a small pool of blood that had begun to burn. I forgot that Ibaraki Dojo had escaped from the 4 heavenly kings of Laiguang. I'm afraid that has become a skill or a noble phantasm. Giving up chasing Ibaraki Dojo, Wu-Ming Dojo turned around and returned. When he came to Matthew and Gadatsi, Wu-Ming Dojo saw the person he had just called out. "You came quite quickly, Karna." At this moment, a white-haired man in golden armor was standing beside Gadatsi and Matthew. The flame in his right eye had not subsided yet. It was Karna. "I came with all my strength after seeing your noble phantasm. It was just a coincidence." Karna shook his head modestly, and the flame in his right eye swayed as he shook his head. It was quite interesting. Furthermore, it was quite clear that the Brahmastra had been launched from Karna's eyes. "Karna really scared me when he came over just now. By the way, assassin, are you alright? Weren't you hurt by Karna?" Gadatsi looked at Wu-Ming Dojo worriedly. At this moment, Wu-Ming Dojo's body was smoking. The smoke was coming out from the gaps in his armor, and it looked like he was being cooked. "Don't worry. Because Sodric was too close to the enemy, I didn't use a noble phantasm with a wide range of damage," Karna explained. Karna defended himself. He understood this point, and didn't use Brahmastra Kundala or anything like that. He couldn't use Sun Wheel, Vaishnavi Shakti, which could only be used when he stripped the golden armor. After all, the golden armor was still on Karna. "The heat on my body was caused by Ibaraki Dojo's noble phantasm. I don't know why, but her ghost claw directly ignored my defense. I was injured, but it's not a big deal." As he spoke, Wu-Ming took out a few bottles of healing potions from the golden ripples that he had already activated. Wu-Ming took off his helmet, revealing his slightly red cheeks. Now, some parts of his body were already cooked. After all, it was as if he was defenseless against an anti-army noble artifact that contained the karmic primordial fire. Even Hercules would lose his life if he was here. It was all thanks to Wu-Ming's B++ durability that he was able to survive. Then Wu-Ming drank the healing potion under everyone's gaze. The white smoke on his body disappeared, and his complexion returned to normal. After all, they had seen potions like this in Winterwood City, so Gadatsi and Matthew didn't look surprised. "Since Karna is here, let's take Denver directly." Chapter 507. Gadatsi nodded. After all, they had fought for so long, and it would be unreasonable to leave now. The original team of 3 plus Karna became a team of 4. The 4 of them headed toward Denver. Although Karna was with them, it still couldn't stop Gadatsi's burning heart. Gadatsi stared at Karna's eyes, which were no longer emitting sparks, and asked curiously, "Speaking of which, Karna can release a noble artifact with his eyes. It's really a divine artifact." "It's no big deal. A true hero kills with his eyes," Karna replied casually. After all, he was a man of few words. "Only you can say something like that." Wu Ming smiled helplessly at the side, then continued. I can't kill enemies with my eyes. I can only say that Karna is worthy of his reputation. Gadatsi and Matthew were amused by Wu Ming's teasing. In the face of Wu Ming's teasing, Karna didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. Although it's not very nice to interrupt you, you're about to go deep into the enemy's base. Is it really okay to look like you're going on a field trip? At this moment, Roman's voice suddenly came from Gadatsi's bracelet. This voice. Is it the magician with the magical ability? Although he couldn't see the person, Karna remembered Roman's voice. The magical ability Karna mentioned was the remote virtual screen. It seemed that many servants were interested in this kind of magic. This magician is right, we do seem to be too relaxed. Of course, Karna had always been a steady person. He was just Wu Ming and Gadatsi. Mashu also had a dignified look on her face, so she wasn't any worse than Karna. Senpai, I think the doctor is right. We really do look a little relaxed. Matthew whispered. You're right. Aha. Gadatsi smiled awkwardly. However, Wu Ming shook his head. The fact that Tachika doesn't have any psychological pressure is the best support for us, so it's not wrong to relax a little. Even though Gadatsi basically didn't have the ability to provide support. Plus, we look very relaxed, but haven't you noticed that the ghosts that were supposed to be attacking us are all gone? After repelling Ibaraki Boy, there were no more ghosts that came to attack Wu Ming's group. It seems that they don't think it's going to work no matter how many ghosts they send, Karna analyzed. However, compared to them not coming down to die, I'm more inclined to believe that those ghosts have all disappeared. Why do you say that? Gadatsi questioned Wu Ming's words. Yes, it's time for the genius. Suddenly, a Mona Lisa appeared beside Wu Ming and the others. Wu Ming had seen Da Vinci before, but Karna hadn't. Therefore he was quite interested in this newcomer. Karna narrowed his eyes. He could feel that this was a servant. Da Vinci's servant? Matthew said with some confusion. Yes, it's the genius Matthew. Roman went to the toilet. Da Vinci looked at Matthew with a smile, then began to explain. Although it's strange, the detector on my side has clearly detected that something is amiss ahead. The ahead mentioned by Da Vinci was a place like a cliff in front of them. Da Vinci's servant, but there's nothing in front? Gadatsi was also very puzzled. I forgot to mention this, Matthew. We can say that we have arrived in Denver. With that, Wu Ming walked toward the cliff. Gadatsi and the others also followed. The place where Gadatsi was located was not a cliff, but rather a flat area at the bottom of the mountain. Of course, even so, its average altitude was still 1,600 meters above sea level. A huge fortress similar to a Japanese-style ancient city is located below. That is the city of Denver. It can be said that the city of Denver is at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. I was a little worried about what to do if there was a mudslide or something. After the improvement of the genius, Chaldea's instrument has adapted to the high magic density environment. There should have been a lot of life in front of us, but after you defeated Ibaraki Boy, all those lives disappeared. Although Chaldea's instrument is used to detect magic, the magic in this world is transformed by life, so it can also detect magic. Anyway, whether they were killed or used as sacrifices, most of the ghosts in the strange city of Denver have disappeared. That is to say, the remaining magic waves belong to the servants, right? Wu Ming asked. That's right. This is a battle between heroes without their servants. Anyway, only you and Karna can participate in the battle. Matthew still has to protect Tachika. So that's it. I still have to continue improving the instrument here. Good luck, Tachika. After that, Da Vinci cut off the communication. As expected of Da Vinci's kin? As always, he feels reliable. Gadatsi smiled awkwardly. Obviously, reliable was a derogatory term. Don't worry. I think she probably thinks that Karna and I are here, so Da Vinci can rest assured that we will protect you. You should know that both Karna and I are not simple people, Wu Ming comforted. Let me say something first. Karna raised his hand. I don't have the ability to protect others. This armor is the only thing that can protect others. However, because Sodric and I are the only combatants here, I can't easily hand over the armor to you. After all, if Karna had given his armor to Gadatsi, then he would have been much weaker than Gadatsi. After all, not only did he have to release the fatal sun wheel, but he also had to give up the golden armor to Vasvi Shakti. Without the golden armor, Karna would no longer be the invincible Karna he used to be. At that time he would have to be like an ordinary warrior and not let himself get hurt easily. Because without the golden armor, Karna was neither invincible nor able to recover from his injuries, nor could he use the essence of the sun to heal the foreign objects in his body, so he was much weaker. You don't have to worry about that at all. Matthew is very reliable, Gadotsi said to Karna with a smile. As she spoke, she gave Matthew a thumbs up, which made Matthew's face instantly turn red. However, Matthew did not hesitate to protect Gadotsi. I won't let any senior come to any harm. Looking at Matthew's determined and powerful eyes, both Wuming and Karna smiled with relief. It's your blessing to have such a servant, master? Karna chuckled. The praise made Matthew's face turn red again, and Gadotsi looked at Matthew happily. Because Matthew is my lovely junior, Gadotsi hugged Matthew as she spoke. Senpai. Wait a minute. Mashu, who was being held, could only struggle weakly. In that case, I'll lead the way first. Wuming nodded to Karna, Gadotsi, and Matthew, then stood at the side of the mountain. Mythical Yggdrasil. Chapter 508. Even Wuming knew that a town could not be built directly at the foot of a mountain, so Wuming did not think that others did not know about this problem. Moreover, the Denver city in front of him was completely built in Japanese style, and it was a huge city. It did not look like an ordinary city in this era. This was undoubtedly the trump card of a servant, a noble phantasm. Therefore, the way Wuming chose to open the way was definitely different from the usual way. Facing the Japanese city of mysteries, which only had a few servants left, Wuming's way of opening the way was to directly blast open the gate with his noble phantasm. With the release of his noble phantasm, Wuming was not in a hurry to throw out the holy spear. Instead, he held it with both hands and kept it hidden, constantly gathering mana and holy light. This huge amount of mana. Karna was a little shocked. This amount of mana was already comparable to all the mana of a first-class servant, and it was even slightly more than that. Moreover, at this moment, Wuming's attack was still enough to compete with Karna's solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, in terms of explosive power. The reason why they only competed in terms of explosive power was because Karna's solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, was an extremely special noble phantasm. It did not mean that it was only effective against gods, but it had an additional effect on gods. Moreover, if Karna released his noble phantasm and did not release it, he was afraid that his solar wheel, Vasvi Shakti, would be enough to overpower Wuming's attack. However, this was a joke. How could anyone let their enemy charge their noble phantasm? However, Wuming had been charging for so long, and no one came out to stop him. It seemed that his opponent really did let Wuming do whatever he wanted. He really did not know what his opponent was thinking. Karna was a little helpless, but he did not expect anyone to stop Wuming. He was just disappointed in his enemy. But then again, would the Japanese city be able to defend against Wuming's relic? Anyway, they would find out soon. Karna was looking forward to seeing how Wuming would complete the relic's relic. After all, if the noble phantasm was to explode here, he would be able to survive with his golden armor. However, Matthew would not be able to protect Gadotsi, as he would not be able to activate his noble phantasm in time. Gadotsi would definitely be blown to smithereens. Just as Karna was about to take off his golden armor and put it on Gadotsi, Wuming finally moved. Wuming raised the shrunken version of the holy spear in his hand, which was white on the outside and black on the inside, in front of him. This was the effect of the holy spear being compressed to the extreme. It was so white that it was black, and it had shrunk to the extreme. The reason why he did not throw it on his shoulder like a javelin was that Wuming was not sure that he could control the holy spear that was about to explode in his hand. Therefore, Wuming put the holy spear in front of his chest as if he was holding a ceremony. Then Wuming recited the oath. The next attack is the real legend. Accept the judgment. Because the name of the relic had already been recited, there was no need to release the real name again. Then Wuming threw the holy spear into the sky. The holy spear, which was so white that it was almost black, penetrated the clouds. It was like some kind of attack that fell from the sky, and it flew away without a trace. Then, like a divine punishment, the sky and earth changed color. In the sky above the Japanese city of mysteries, black clouds were constantly rotating with faint thunder and lightning. The vortex in the middle began to shine like hidden thunder, which made people frown. Gadotsi and Matthew looked at this scene and were both stunned. This was a lot more than the previous battle. Of course, the servants in this Japanese city of mysteries must have noticed it too. Then Wuming snapped his fingers. Pa! In an instant, white light covered the entire land. After some time, Gadatsi opened her eyes. She rubbed her eyes that were uncomfortable because of the sudden strong light. Then Gadatsi began to look around. Matthew was holding a shield to protect Gadatsi, while Karna was in front of Matthew, using his body as a shield. Matthew did it subconsciously. He did not know that Wuming had calculated the range of the attack, and he did not know that the damage of the relic would not affect here. However, some of the wind swept over. That was why Karna chose to stay in front of Matthew and Gadatsi when he knew that there would be no actual harm. This move is too cruel. Gadatsi held back for a long time, and that was all she could say. Karna nodded. Wuming's move was comparable to his Godslayer spear. It was quite destructive. However, Wuming waved his hand calmly. After all, no one came out to disturb me. This is a rare opportunity. If I don't accumulate more mana, wouldn't I be sorry? That was the terrifying thing about Wuming's spiritual base. It did not seem to be too powerful, and it felt no different from the previous servants' bodies. However, that was not the case. The interior of this spiritual base had been carefully modified by Wuming, and the modification took place in the root. It could be said that if Wuming wanted to, he only needed to accumulate power for a day and a night, and then use the relic to self-destruct. Then, the American continent, which was the singularity, would disappear. Wuming completely removed the restrictions of the spiritual base in the root. In other words, as long as it was an attack that could be achieved in theory, Wuming could do it now. Just like the self-destruct of the American continent mentioned earlier, if there was enough mana and he could control it, Wuming was fully capable of destroying the singularity. Wuming's cheating method was not what it looked like on the surface. Of course, part of the power provided by the Holy Grail was also part of it. Although the Holy Grail had always seemed useless, it was something that the Magic King used to confuse people. How could it be so simple? After Chaldea recovered the Holy Grail, he also nervously protected it. Da Vinci also studied it very carefully. Naturally, the Holy Grail could not be underestimated. Of course, Wuming was here to save the singularity, not to destroy it, so he would not blow up the American continent. Gadatsi and Matthew, who had just come to their senses, smiled awkwardly after hearing Wuming's words. Moreover, don't underestimate this city. Although it didn't completely block it, it can still be considered to have blocked my noble artifact. Wuming's words stunned Gadatsi, Matthew, and Karna. Gadatsi and Matthew were surprised that the other party could actually block such a terrifying relic, while Karna was surprised that there was a city that could block a relic that was comparable to his Godslayer spear. With this thought in mind, the three of them looked at the Japanese-style city below. The originally gorgeous and dignified city had been damaged as if it had experienced a natural disaster. The outer city towers had basically collapsed, and the various pavilions and houses inside were almost completely destroyed. The entire city could be said to be in a sorry state. Only the palace-like hall in the center was still intact, but it had lost its previous gorgeous and dignified aura and color, giving a feeling that it had lost its power. Let's go. My relic only destroyed the other party's relic. I'm afraid the servants on the other side did not suffer any damage. After Wuming finished speaking, Gadatsi and Matthew looked at each other and nodded encouragingly. Then, let's take the Holy Grail here today. In this way, the four of them moved toward the dilapidated city. Chapter 509. Because the distance was very close, the four of them only took a few minutes to reach the gate of the city. Looking at Gadatsi, who was still trying to figure out how to contact Roman, Wuming smiled helplessly. Because of Wuming's noble phantasm, the communication device that had been repaired was destroyed again. Because Da Vinci modified the communication device to adapt to the situation of high magic concentration, Wuming directly used super magic explosion on her and directly cut off the communication system. It was estimated that if they wanted to contact each other again, Da Vinci would have to further modify the device, at least to adapt it to the magic concentration of Kanzaki's atmosphere. No longer paying attention to Gadatsi, Wuming looked at the half-destroyed door and said thoughtfully, "To be able to do this, I'm afraid the other party used the Holy Grail." Karna nodded after seeing the situation. "I'm afraid that's the case, otherwise I really can't think of any defense that can block such a catastrophic attack." However, Wuming smiled slightly. He really did know of a noble phantasm that could defend against any kind of damage. King Arthur's scabbard, Avalon. As someone who was familiar with the story of King Arthur and had accompanied King Arthur for half of his life, Wuming naturally understood the power of Avalon. True name Liberation could produce an unparalleled defensive barrier that was like a layer of scales, and even the good separation sword might not be able to break it. An Avalon could also make the wearer never get hurt, and it was in a semi-invincible state. Wu Ming knew that Avalon would be accidentally lost, but because Wu Ming thought that Artoria needed Avalon more, he had always asked Artoria to carry it with her. Anyway, Avalon was not lost until Wu Ming left by himself, but from the ending, Avalon was still lost. Perhaps this was the will of the heavens. Damn it. If it weren't for the fact that Wu Ming had played his part, being a knight, how could Morgan Le Fay have been tricked by him? In a direct confrontation, Morgan Le Fay wouldn't have been able to defeat Wu Ming. Moreover, if Wu Ming's main body had appeared at that time, he would have been able to crush Morgan Le Fay with his little finger. Moreover, he wouldn't have needed any reason to do so. After all, if you provoked the Origin Dragon, would it need a reason to crush you? Of course not. The more Wu Ming thought about it, the angrier he got. He quickly took a deep breath and stopped thinking about it. Phew, Karna looked at Wu Ming in confusion but didn't say anything. Ahem. Let's go in. Wu Ming coughed and walked toward the door. As soon as they entered the city gate, Wu Ming realized that something was wrong. He immediately waved for Gadatsi to stop. The air here is highly toxic. Then he immediately covered himself with magic power. Wu Ming realized that not only the air, but even the ground under his feet was full of poison. Strangely, the poison didn't spread outside. It was as if the city was an inherent enchantment filled with poison. Wu Ming himself wasn't very afraid of poison. However, the poison this time was a little different. Therefore, Wu Ming didn't dare to be careless. Sizzle! Although Wu Ming covered himself with a magic power shield, the poison in the air had begun to corrode Wu Ming's outer appearance. This poison is a little too strong. Wu Ming increased the magic power output of his magic power shield. Then I can't go in? Gadatsi was a little disappointed. Wu Ming looked at Gadatsi awkwardly. Do you really think this is a tourist attraction? Now it's time for me to take action, Karna said. After all, Wu Ming had invited him to deal with the poison. Karna walked through the gate and waved his spear. The true sun fire burst out of his body and began to burn the poison. The ground was penetrated by Karna's flames and gradually turned red, as if lava was about to erupt. The air was also covered and burned by Karna's flames. It's really working, Matthew said excitedly. However, Karna and Wu Ming didn't look very happy. Because both Wu Ming and Karna could feel that the burned area was filled with poison again. This poison seemed to be inexhaustible. Even if one area was burned, the poison in other areas would fill in. Even the poison that filled in made Karna's flames burn more vigorously. Smelling the intoxicating smell in the air, Wu Ming said without hesitation. This place is filled with the poison of fine wine. It's probably Shitendaji. As Karna burned, more and more wine fragrance came from the air. Cough cough. Cough cough cough. Matthew began to cough. Matthew, are you okay? Gadatsi looked at Matthew worriedly. Matthew's face was purple. There was no doubt that he was poisoned. Wu Ming took out a bottle of potion from his golden ripple and threw it into Gadatsi's hand. It seems that Shitendaji's poison has begun to spread. Matthew is poisoned. This is the antidote. Give it to Matthew. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Gadatsi hurriedly uncorked the potion bottle and carefully helped Matthew drink the potion. After drinking the potion, Matthew's complexion immediately improved. It had to be said that the game's products were all excellent. Detoxification was like a rule. Because of the characteristics of the antidote, Matthew was no longer poisoned. Thank you very much, Senpai Cylinder. Matthew thanked Wu Ming. Hearing such solemn words, Wu Ming seemed to see Galahad. Compared to Cylinder, I prefer you to call me by my other name. Matthew looked at Wu Ming in confusion. I'm kidding. Matthew, just be Matthew. The rest is just a matter of people abandoned by time. Don't worry about it. To be honest, if Matthew really copied Galahad's words, Wu Ming would not be very happy. After all, being himself was the most important thing. Then, without waiting for Matthew to respond to Wu Ming's words, Wu Ming took out a few bottles of potions from his golden ripples and threw them to Matthew and Gadatsi. Tachika, you and Matthew take these bottles of antidote and immediately return to the place where we were just now. The poison here will spread soon. It's not safe. Leave it to me and Karna, Wu Ming said solemnly. Okay, I got it. Gadatsi also answered Wu Ming seriously. She also knew the seriousness of the matter. Just the spread of the poison was enough to poison Matthew. She was afraid that it would be very dangerous inside. As a qualified master, Gadatsi made a gesture of complete trust in his servant. Then I'll leave it to you. Cylinder, Karna, I need you to tell me the story of what will happen here. Gadotsi smiled at the two people who were already standing in the poison area. No problem. Understood, Master. Wuming and Karna said without hesitation. Then Gadotsi and Matthew, who had recovered, began to run away from the poison area. Wuming looked at Gadotsi's figure and touched his chin thoughtfully. It seemed that Tachika's poison resistance was not that simple. In this case he did not have to worry about her safety. As for Matthew, he would be fine with a few bottles of antidote. Relieved, Wuming looked at Karna. How is it? You should be fine, right? Karna seemed to be verifying something, and flames burst out of his body. Although I can't completely burn these poisons, they can't hurt me either. The son of the sun god was not just for show. Then let's go and find out the truth of all this. Chapter 510. This poison that defied common sense was able to block Wu Ming's precious artifact. They were clearly a power, yet they knew their place. This was what they were currently puzzled about. However, there was a more important point. They had to retrieve the Holy Grail and save this era. Therefore, it would be best if they could retrieve the Holy Grail without bloodshed and without any casualties on either side. However, from Lulu's previous attack and the current poison, it was clear that the other side had no intention of making peace. It could only be said that the heroic spirits were a group of super problematic characters who were bored in the heroic spirit palace. The reason why heroic spirits were called heroes or anti-heroes was that they were different from ordinary people. And these differences had long since established their identities as problematic characters. If they met someone they liked, the other party would instantly become brothers with them. However, if they didn't like the other party, they wouldn't need any fancy reasons. Just the simple reason of not liking the other party was enough to make them fight. However, it was precisely because of this casual nature that these heroes became heroic spirits. It was also because of the personalities of heroic spirits that Gadotsi didn't show any fear on this journey to save humanity. After all, Gadotsi held the fate of humanity in her hands. However, Gadotsi wouldn't complain or be afraid because she had Matthew by her side, a companion full of personalities on the road. Cough cough. However, it was also because some heroic spirits were too individualistic that they stood on the opposite side of reason. At least that was the case for now. Just like the female high school student in front of Wuming and Karna. Next, this road is blocked, Lulu said to Wuming and Karna kindly. Although she was also in this poisonous area, for some reason she wasn't affected by the poison at all. As if she had guessed Wuming and Karna's thoughts, Lulu waved her hand and began to explain. Of course, Shutendaji's poison is very strong, and it doesn't differentiate between friend and foe. I'm also affected here. Of course, Wuming really didn't want to know. Then Lulu's body slightly emitted a trace of magic, and a faint golden light attached to her body. It's all thanks to the Holy Grail. Holy Grail, Wu Ming could more or less guess what was going on. After coming into contact with the Holy Grail, he had temporarily gained immunity to Shutendaji's poison. Okay, then I'll leave this holy maiden, who also has divinity like you, to you, Karna. After Karna nodded, Wu Ming changed direction and continued to walk toward the central hall. No, wait a minute. Why did you leave just like that? Ling Lu Guzan felt helpless when he saw Wu Ming leave without paying attention to him. Whoosh, with the sound of the wind, Lulu dodged the spear Karna, who was rushing to attack. You to me, Karna, you to attack. Lulu's is to me. Lulu's to say, Karna. Lulu to attack, to kills, to hit, full, you attack. Since you're an enemy, then let's fight. Karna, who had transformed into an aloof Adonis, didn't say anything else and swung his spear at Lulu again. Bang! A samurai sword emitting a golden and silver glow blocked Karna's spear. Lulu took out the Samantabhadra wisdom sword from somewhere and blocked Karna's attack. Since the Samantabhadra had already appeared, the Samantabhadra naturally appeared as well. A samurai sword emitting a golden glow floated in the sky. It was the Samantabhadra. The Samantabhadra split from 1 to 2, 2 to 4 and 4 to 8. In just a few seconds, it had split into hundreds of Samantabhadra. Then I'm going to get serious too. Take this attack, demigod hero of India. Ling Lu's previous carelessness was replaced by a solemn expression. Tenkiame, heavenly phantom rain. In an instant, hundreds of Samantabhadra fell directly in front of Karna and Lulu, causing a violent explosion. Boom, boom, boom. In front of him, Wu Ming heard the explosion behind him and glanced sideways. You should have no problem dealing with Lulu, right? Good luck, Karna. With that, Wu-Ming sped up and ran toward the central hall. When he was almost at the front of the hall, a woman in a gorgeous blue dress that resembled a witch's costume appeared in front of Wu-Ming, half kneeling. She had the same fox ears and tail as Lulu, but the fox in front of Wu-Ming looked a little like a wife. However, if Wu-Ming wasn't mistaken, she had 6 tails behind her. Although the fox looked weak, it had a lot of magic power in its body. Moreover, she had a golden glow on her body. There was no doubt that she had come into contact with the Holy Grail and obtained a temporary immunity. A second fox, in addition to your rather strong magic power based on my guess, you should be one of the 3 great demons along with Shitendaji and Daitengu Tamamonome. However, from what I know, Tamamonome should have 9 tails, but you actually only have 6. Saying so, Wu-Ming looks towards the fox spirit who is standing in front of the main hall. To be honest, other than Tamamonome, Wu-Ming couldn't think of anyone else who could have a fox spirit that was on par with Lulu. Although he was curious why she was half kneeling. Yes, I've been waiting for you for a long time, Surrender-sama. As for the number of tails, it's only because I haven't recovered my strength. Tamamonome easily admitted her identity. Tamamonome seemed to be in a good mood. The 6 tails behind her swayed, and her body emitted a trace of mana. Wu-Ming frowned slightly and said, "This familiar mana. I'm afraid you're the one who saved Ibaraki Duji." Wu-Ming felt this magic power. It was the same magic power that appeared on the talisman paper in front of Ibaraki Boy. Yes, you're right, Surrender-sama, Tamamonome said with a smile. He felt that this woman was getting stranger. Wu-Ming pondered. Then, if you can step aside, I think we can continue to talk like this. Although Wu-Ming didn't think that she would easily step aside. After all, she was one of the 3 great monsters of Japan, the white-faced golden 9-tailed fox. Moreover, it was said that Tamamonome was actually the incarnation of the Japanese sun god, Amaterasu. Those who were related to gods were not to be trifled with. Take Ling Lu Guzan for example. Don't be fooled by her abnormal appearance. She was not someone to be trifled with. Wu-Ming didn't think that she was a simple servant who could successfully ambush his group and survive after being blown up by his noble phantasm. At the very least, this Tamamonome and Lulu Guzan weren't as simple as they looked. After all, the most important point was that Wu-Ming never told Tamamonome that his name was Surrender. She must have learned about Wu-Ming's information through some means. Wu-Ming judged. Fortunately, she didn't know Wu-Ming's name as the Root Dragon. Otherwise Wu-Ming would really be shocked. Then, just as Wu-Ming was about to make the first move, Tamamonome spoke. Her words shocked him from another perspective. Of course, Surrender-sama. Then Wu-Ming looked at Tamamonome with a strange and unbelievable look. Did Shitendaji know that you betrayed him? You may not know, but Shitendaji has left this hall. Wu-Ming was taken aback. She left here, how rare. Wu-Ming instantly thought of a possibility. Yes, it's what you think. Tamamonome said instantly. Wu-Ming didn't enter the hall. Instead, he immediately turned around and prepared to leave. However, as if he thought of something again, Wu-Ming stopped and turned to look at Tamamonome. I have a question, why did you tell me this news? Tamamonome seemed to have heard the question she wanted to ask, and there was a smile on the corner of her mouth. Because I want to marry you, Wu-Ming-sama. In an instant, Wu-Ming's eyes widened. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.